That was a color differentiation.
Great.
I like it great.
Pretty monotone.
We have to do a roll call. They're all voting. They're voting on the order, so it has to be.
I happen to be that Irish from.
Okay, here. Laura. Can you hear us, Laura?
You guys gonna be running this show here?
Thanks for asking me to make sure this is going, which it is.
Hi.
Okay, thanks.
Hey, Fred, Laura, can you hear us?
Yeah, there's a.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, I'm gonna start the sign
You
system.
can sit here.
Yeah.
Sit by me.
No, I'll sit.
I think they just came and started it.
I'm good.
Here.
We're gonna have to check the comments.
That's what he said.
You need this?
Probably.
Hey, Andy, what's up?
It's more public comment. These are the ones that we emailed. You got them today.
The 3-minute one.
Turn this on.
From elevator to church. Turn the recorders on. Have some experience.
Yeah.
We still have 3 minutes till we start, folks, so keep talking.
I don't know. Only horses.
No, I think I'm saying something.
That the upside down. 160, so we got that was my design.
So it was about together.
There you go. There you go.
Next week it might be like. Put on there whatever. We didn't hear from Fred Rockwitz, whether he was going to be able to make it.
He's on the phone.
Oh, he's on the phone.
With Laura. Fred.
And Laura's on the phone also?
Yeah.
The town grants.
10 sorry, we reached our capacity.
Get the chair right up front, Tim.
I'd say your timing was perfect.
No.
All right, everybody, it is 4:00 on Wednesday, the 14th. I'd like to welcome you all to today's Harbor Commission meeting. If you do a roll call, we'll get started.
Michael Esposito.
Here.
Laura Coors.
Here.
Jeff James.
Here.
Dick Schiller. Flicker Reagan.
Here.
Bill McCullough.
Here.
Bartlett.
Here.
Tim Fletcher Rice.
Here.
And Fred Rockwitz.
Here.
We do have a quorum.
Great, thanks, Dave. There's all a couple of commission members on speakerphone attending today, so the protocol will be similar to what we normally do, except we'll be asking you for a roll call vote at every actionable item so that we can record their info on it. So that's how the meeting will run. First item on the agenda is approval of minutes from our meeting, which includes in your packet. Commissioners, anybody have any corrections or changes to this?
I've got a couple of typos.
Oh, wait, look at.
Okay, on page 2, under A, Little Traverse Light Tower reconditioning. In the third line, Little Traverse Light Town, that should be Tower. And on the next page, second to the last line, village manager states in addition, not additional. And that's it.
Very good, noted.
Andy Potter here. Andy, that's like A minus.
I know. I'll take it. That's how I roll. Thank you.
I would entertain a motion to accept the minutes with changes noted. Somebody want to support that first?
I'll give you the motion.
Thanks, Michael. Supported by Jeff. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Oh, we have to do roll call. Don't go ahead.
Yeah, unfortunately. Fred Rockwitz. Tim Fletcher Rice.
Aye.
Jim Bartlett.
Aye.
Bill McCullough.
Aye.
Flicker Reagan.
Aye.
Dick Schiller.
Aye.
Jeff James.
Aye.
Laura Coors.
Aye.
And Michael Esposito.
Aye.
Motion carried.
Thank you. Next item is the approval of the agenda. Everybody's had a chance to look at that. Are there any additions, changes to that? Anybody wants to bring up at this time? Hearing none, we'll move forward. Next up is public comment. Anybody in the public, you're all here today. Anything they'd like to say for any items that are not on the agenda for today? Now's the time for you to stand up and speak your piece. Well, we're pretty focused group, and that's good. Old business. First item up is the Harbor Master Building update. Rick, do you want to jump in on this? You want me?
Sure.
Why don't you go ahead, start.
Probably read my short memo there. Basically, the time has come for us, for planning purposes, to decide what are we going to do and when at the Harbor Master, with the Harbor Master Building at the lot there. So we have some, I would say, interests and concerns and questions from the public as well as council members about when are we going to improve or do something with the park, the green space there, and a lot of our answers rely on, or we need to know basically when the Harbor Commission is going to recommend to the council that they will do the Harbor Master Building, or if they're going to go ahead with the Harbor Master Building, the new Harbor Master Building, how are we going to fund that, and what the timeline will be for that. Because what we do with that park space will be dependent on whether or not we go ahead with the Harbor Master Building and when we go ahead with the Master Building. So I pose a few questions really that I think the Harbor Commission should answer, and one is the Harbor Commission still going to recommend continuing with the proposed design? If we do continue proceeding with the proposed design, when will we aim to have that building completed? And how can the city fund the new design? Those are three questions. I know there had been some previous talk about potentially not doing a new building, but altering the existing building as well for some change the bathrooms and maybe add and improve the existing building. So that's a fourth possibility. But I do know that the reason we kind of put it back was, or we were unsure of it, is because with the high waters, there's potential a lot of damage to our shoreline and docks that we need to save funds for. And that was big reason, as well as the city turned down the grant for $650,000, so we have to figure out how we make up that money. So those are the 3 questions on the table. I want to take a recommendation of council, so then we'll review our capital improvements planning as city staff. We can let the council know when we expect to be able to put some money aside for the building or for the park. So I'll leave it up to the table.
To recap for the general audience and maybe some of us here at the board table, we decided to not move ahead with that building plan primarily because of the record high water we've experienced in the last 18 months. I think that was a very wise decision at the time, and still may be our best course on this because we've had to spend money that we were going to use for this building in other areas around the city. So far, we spent over $100,000 mitigating waterfront issues that are related to high water from the beach all the way down to Zoll Street. So I think that was a decision made with great forethought on that. I'm glad that we did it and didn't push ahead with this building because we would have been trying to battle a financial crisis on several different fronts at that time. So that's where we left it pretty well at the table. We also, with turning down the state's money, which came with terms that were not known to the city when we first began this design process, because we had some changes down in Lansing. We lost what would have been the most significant funding source for this. So a building that would cost us more than $1 million now falls solely on our hands instead of the state making 5% of it, which was the original plan. So we have to be careful with how we spend our money. As to the high water issue, we still are in record high water here. Well, thank goodness it's going down seasonally, something that didn't do much last year. We're seeing it go down now. We'll be talking about that later at the meeting. But we are not out of the woods when it comes to high water, and we really don't know what is going to happen. So that risk is still out there for us, financially, as we look forward. So I'll open up to the table and just see if there's any feelings from the table as to whether we ought to continue this course or look at some other direction.
If we exhausted all funding possibilities, are there others out there?
There's always potential funding opportunities,
But it's
but
just looking at one that I got, it just came in about 2 days ago, in the coastal management program, a grant opportunity for various items, including enhancements to the public access to the water. That's what the state initiative, coastal management program. So maybe other things are open, if not.
Good point, too.
This is Laura Court. Ready for another?
Fire away, Laura.
Okay, we spent years working on a plan that we needed, we came up with the best possible plan we could, and we loved the money, but we did not use the vision, and I do not want this to stop. I can't tell you we'll be ready to gather up that cash in 2 years or 5 years, but I would hope 10 years from now, we would see this building at a point on where it is.
Thank you for your comment on that.
Thank you.
Everybody at the table hear that? Yes, Michael.
I wasn't at the table when most of the planning took place, but it seems like the consensus has been that we want a new building. There's a design that's been approved, for lack of a better word, or accepted. So the question is funding. And so we could sit here for years saying, where's the money going to come from? But at some point, we could look at it and say, where are the potential sources and how much time will we give ourselves to acquire those? There's obviously the one that could contribute. There's whatever the city uses in its various funds. I'm not an expert in that area. I don't know what the city's availability is to borrow money. There's potentially private funds and there's grants or those type of things. So one approach would be to take the cost of this building and split it into percentages and say, you know, in the next 6 months, 8 months, a year, we want to fill in those gaps. Because at this point, we don't know how much people would be asking the waterfront fund to contribute or the city to contribute or anyone else. It's just a number. And personally, we'll never reach that number because nobody's going to stand up and say, here's the money. We're going to have to go for it. And maybe splitting it into some percentage of the use of that building would help. I don't believe it should all come from the waterfront fund because I don't believe it's a waterfront only building. So there are other stakeholders. That would be a potential path if you wanted to move forward, would be to figure out where is this money, or where does it potentially come from and then pursue those. We've gone down a grant route, it didn't work out, okay?
I think the observation that the city would be contributing to this building is right on the money and something that's been discussed from the get-go because that building is used, especially with the year-round bathrooms on the north side of that. And I think the city understands that we'll be counting on some general fund dollars to do that. Our problem is compounded in that area because the city's out of money for capital projects, if I understand the paper right now, and they're actually considering a tax increase to help fund some of these things. So the issues on that side are still there too. But well said, we do need to, we had to stop because of high water and the grant went away and maybe it's time to start looking at something else. But the question for us today is to give some indication, or our duty is to give some indication to the city manager as to our intent, and that would be a good intent, something structured. Let's try and sit down and put this together. But also, your real question is being driven from what are we going to do with that park? The questions from the public and from the staff are not talking about the building, they're talking about things they want to do with the park. So I wonder if you've heard from us that our intent is to still go ahead with the project as drawn. We've got quite a bit invested in that, both time and dollars. And to hopefully with some reduction in water where we can start to count on some funds from the water fund, come up with a number for that, and then work with the city, have the city staff start to look at other avenues for grants and funding processes. I know Nick was talking about bonding at one time, and
It's an option, sure.
there's an option with that. But to give the city, our intent is to still use that space. So if you want to do more to the park, which I think is totally fine, plan on saving that space. Integrate that space in your design so you can continue to move forward on whatever projects you want to do. Is that,
Hey, could I ask a question? I simply don't remember, under that grant that we did apply for and didn't accept, what was the ratio of state money to our money?
75-25, right?
It was 50-50, I recall 50-50.
50-50?
the interesting thing though, Michael, is when we first contacted the state, when we started on that planning, it was 80% state money, 20% city money. And then the game changed. Hence some of our financial struggles.
I guess it's the follow-up question then, so right now I'm gathering, I see a lot of head nods for, yeah, we're still planning on going forward with the building as is in the location and the design, but I heard a few different numbers of, maybe 2 to 5 years, maybe 10 years, we don't know. And I think that's going to affect what we can do with the park space, or how much we can do with certain parts of the park space, because you obviously cannot put certain infrastructure designs on a park space that's only half there, because right now half of it's there, but the top corner you see is parking lot. So we have currently. So, but we do if we have a plan of, all right, we're aiming for 5 years to get this done, or we're aiming for 7 years or 10 years, then it can help staff understand, all right, what we can do to that park in phases. And any recommendation of staff and council on when you think we want to or can see it done would be, I think, would be helpful.
Would anybody disagree with the statement that we would proceed ahead with this, given another year of more normalcy in water levels? Hopefully we're at the top of this curve and going down. If we had the funding. I could see this start a year or two if the water levels continue to decline seasonally and we found the money for it. So what if we can't predict with the water? And the second if would depend on the city's ability through staff work to come up with other funding options, like I said.
I would like to ask her to comment. What happens, this is Fred Rockwood, what happens if we water goes down some, we put some money into the frontage. And then the water back up again. Is there gonna be a loss again there?
And I guess from my perspective, we would design the building elevation to make sure that we could accommodate any high water surge on that. And hopefully with enough time, 2 or 3 years, whatever, 4 years it takes to get this going, we've built up the waterfront fund enough where we're gonna have enough money to meet our commitment to the building and also have enough dollars to take care of any other infrastructure struggles that we have due to high water, which we're not in a position of doing right now. Is that a fair answer? Does it make sense to everyone?
Would you consider reevaluating the state's grant, the $650,000?
I would say that's up to the city, if they wanted to do that. That did not fit with us before. And there are considerable springs. It's easy to look at that grant and go, oh my gosh, you walked away from $1.5 million. But the state had significant strings on that as to how that dock could be used, who got to do what, who was responsible, to the point where they could even take back ownership on that if the city, for whatever reason that they determined, did not meet their requirements on the city. It was definitely a one-sided contract. Nobody wanted to turn away the money, but nobody wanted to give the state our harbor. One of the Harbor Springs is we've done things over the years, mostly without the state's involvement. And the biggest project, the two big ones out there are the mooring field and the East Dock. The beauty of that is we control it. The city controls it. And we don't have to let somebody from Lansing tell us how to run what this town wants. And we've been, I think, fiercely independent in the state as long as we can be. And with the strings that they put on that deal, it just did not make sense. We'd be selling our soul out to the state of Michigan for $600,000. Yeah, I think we're worth more than that. Yes, please.
Would you want to mention also that if the state got involved, we'd lose our two-tiered, wake zone?
There was all kinds of conditions in that thing that made it not only to the Harbor Commission to reject that money, but also to the city council. Now, if the state wants to change their terms, we're happy to.
Yeah, I don't think they'll do that, but I do know that based on finances in the state and everywhere, even finances here at Harbor Springs, grants are going to be hard to come by. And from what I understand, waterway grants are our best shot at getting a grant. That's why I asked the question.
Well, I think town answered, or the city council answered that question when we turned that money down.
So Nick, I guess that leaves us staff to look at possible funding options. And really, right now, we only have, waterfront fund and potentially the bond.
Well, the bonds, we discussed bonds when we did the FEMA project, and it didn't seem logical at the time because of the interest rates and whatnot. $1 million project in over 20 years would have cost us 1.56 or something like that, which is how that works. But we were in a position that we thought better than to do that. The city does have some bonds expiring in the next 10 years that would free up cash flow. The waterfront fund is actually growing fairly healthy. So to say a bond is an option, absolutely it is. $1 million bond, you can do quite a lot of work down there. And then just knowing that you'll have $150,000, $200,000 a year bond payment for, they'd be less than that over a 20-year period, but then you'd have to make sure you got the payments covered. And so it's an option. Donors are options.
How much of the overall plan, including curbs and gutters and all of that, is intended to be waterfront fund responsibility at this point? Or is our streets and how much is that supposed to come out of waterfront fund? How much is coming from somewhere else? We haven't gotten there.
We never gave a delineation between all that. There has been talk about that, including that if we're going to go in there anyway, we might want to do some infrastructure improvements from our water and street funds anyway. So we have different funds we can take from, but it all depends on, knowing that we are gonna go ahead with the project, and then we can come back with, are we doing, now that we're potentially doing something with the park as well, that there'd be different revenue stream for the park, different fund for the parking lot, for the street, for any water infrastructure, we might have to do some of that old aging infrastructure there, so we'd be coming from different funds, we just haven't broke it down. Because we just don't know the exact details of that part of the project. We know the building, we've discussed the building at length at the Harbor Commission, but we haven't discussed all the other issues at length. Other improvements.
Well, Victor, is it, and board members, is it safe to say that at the table, by consensus, we still believe the plan makes sense? Our goal is to continue to move forward on this thing. And we're doing it a couple of ways. One was by growing the waterfront fund, so we have more revenue, knowing that we are not eligible for that state grant. And then to ask the city staff to explore things such as Dick pointed out and other avenues that they explore, in addition to bonding or financing the project. But I still can't see us going in the ground before 2 years. I guess I would, if the water came back up next year and we didn't have the amount of money we needed in the waterfront fund to pay for projected repairs to the rest of the waterfront and fund the building, I would pull the building off the burner because we have to keep this running.
So a target goal of 5 years?
Does that make sense to everybody?
Yes.
Hopefully soon. What you're looking for?
That's partly what I wanted to do this.
Laura and Fred, that
I was hoping you guys had money in your wallets.
we do just enough for beer. After this.
Say nothing, you know that.
Fred and Laura, I don't want to put words in your mouth. Does that make sense to you?
Yes,
Yes,
Great. Any further discussion on the Harbor Master Building? Let's move on to maybe the future of tonight's meeting. A review of Wallstrom Dock and Bridge license. Victor provided with us a kind of a summary of where we are. We all know how we got here because Wallstrom Dock and Bridge was asked to leave the place they had been in for over 50 years. At that time, the city entered into a 1-year agreement with them where they would be able to base out of Fort Park early season and late season to get the work that's done by this service, not only for private boat owners that are in the city and outside the city, but also a fair amount of work that they do for the city of Harbor Springs with a number of docks that we have for launch and retrieval. We agreed when we put together the contract, which Jim Raymer drew up, and we would review this at the end of the year, which traditionally. And Fred showed up at our September meeting, or August meeting, just kind of to check in to see how we were doing. We had some feedback from him then. And I guess, Fred, I'd like to start out by asking you how you think it went from your perspective, and then we'll talk about, take comments from this table, how we think of this. And I'll get to the public comment stuff in a bit.
Well, I think it went as good as could be expected. There's quite a lot going on down there. And the takeout in the fall has been a lot easier than when we put it in the spring, simply because we're doing it, there's less traffic in general. And the spring was unusually busy, I think, but we were late doing that too, so that hurt us in the spring. So all in all, I think we've done pretty well with it. It's not my first choice, it's my only choice. So we got to live with it. So we don't have a problem with it. We can live with what we have. We'd like to be able to work up until July 1 or June 30th, but And the 15th of August, or September isn't really a bad deal. We just need to get back from wherever we are here, weather permitting. And so sometimes you can't always move on the lake, our kind of equipment, in weather that you could with a regular boat. So those are issues that we have to deal with on an annual basis. But all in all, I think it went well.
Any comments that you don't have addressed in some of the correspondence we have, which will cover it from members of the board as to how they felt about how Fred's operation went? Anything that stuck right out, or you heard from people, or? The one comment I heard was how come you were here so late into July? And as everybody knows, COVID changed all of our lives and added, including this. And they couldn't start when they wanted to, even though they, ironically, the ice was out. What little ice there was out very early. You could have started in March, but because of the lockdown. So he did contact the city, and as he should have, and because he couldn't start what he did, that's why he was here a little longer than normal. The other comment I heard myself was that the boom was not down as it was supposed to be in there. I think he got better with that as the season went on, but certainly we're very close to that stuff. But I saw improvement, so those are the two comments I heard. Flip.
JP, I would like to say in response to Fred that I also agree that we need to be a little bit flexible on when he arrives and when he has to leave, because his work depends on the weather. And if we would have, a long period of very high east winds, it might be that he couldn't do some of the work during those conditions. So I think, in order to have his services effective in the harbor, we have to be flexible with them. I don't think he needs to be here all summer, but, being able to work till June 30th seems like a pretty reasonable request to me. And if weather conditions don't allow him to leave, what else can he do? So I think we do have to be flexible on it.
JB, the point that we and even the city puts restrictions on me that usually don't include working the last week in June. This was the first year in the history of our business we ever put a dock in July. And that was a COVID deal. We just couldn't start when we wanted. So I think we under normal conditions, we would work to get it in to meet guidelines of the resort. So that's really what we really work at. And that's usually, we have to be done by the last week. We don't work the last week in June because of the resort. So that's been the goal.
And our arrangement with you contractually was if you would be out of the control area or the marina area from June 15th and not return until September 15th unless there was some overriding concern, which we worked with you on that. So I think we have that precedent set as long as there's a reason that makes sense and not for something that fits the applicant, not the city. The intent was to keep the Ford Park as clear as we can during the peak season that we have. And other than working over because of COVID, I think that goal was met during the course of the summer.
Yes, I just want to ask Fred, maybe, were there any roadside issues to think about? And I wasn't down there enough to notice, so just transporting the docks back and forth, is that a problem?
Besides being a pain in the neck,
Well, yeah.
no, it really wasn't a problem. Sometimes you have to hold up traffic. And so, but so do you when you launch boats, and there's 1,000 boats get hauled down that street. Bay Street's a busy street. We've started hauling now with a trailer, and a lot of the pieces we can haul with a trailer. We didn't before we started today, just to see how it works, and it's going to work because that keeps you in, you're only using one lane and you're just like anything else with a trailer. So that worked better. It was a little bit longer, but not significant enough. So we would only haul the pieces over the road that we can't do any other way. And then we'd have to have a vehicle in front and back, trying to put your blinkers on and, get people to dodge it at the different marinas so people can go around, go slow. So that's still a pain in the neck.
All right, thank you.
It is what it
I
is.
think Kyle can speak to any concerns that they've seen.
We did receive a complaint this year in reference to the traffic on Main Street from the docks.
Kyle, in your opinion or the opinion of your staff, was they're moving the docks unsafe? I mean, did it create congestion, to put pedestrians or other automobiles at risk? Or?
We never received a complaint from our that it was a problem.
So it's fair to say that your staff was okay with the process that Fred used this year?
Yes, we had no issues at all.
Okay.
From my perspective, I think the one general problem we have with Bay Street, regardless of whether Fred's D&D is there or not, is that bicyclists use the road. They have no to go. So whether it's with, someone hauling boats or just regular vehicles driving down Bay Street in the summertime, there will always be significant issues, potential issues between bicyclists and vehicles. So that's something that we hope to be addressed with a bike path in the future.
Yes, Kyle?
And the only additional thing is that Fort Park was, I feel, busier this year than it ever has been in the past.
We're going to see that in our numbers here. We use Michael's report on this.
So, that's,
In the big picture of things, all of us need to remember that Fort Park had the perfect storm this year. COVID drove people with every kind of boat, all kinds of new boat sales down to use Fort Park, folks who haven't done it in the past. Irish Boat Shop had their construction going on right next door, which caused parking and truck and delivery congestions over in that area. And it just, any decision, and with the start of the ferry, and we'll be talking about them in a minute, there was a lot going on. We need to be careful how we think about Fort Park based on just this summer. Without COVID, without the boat shop, about the park may not be as impacted as we feel they are right now. So we don't want to just shoot from the hip on this, I don't think. There was one other question you had in your report, Victor, misunderstanding on the position of the barge. I think I understand what happened. What came out of this commission, went to council, was a barge in a north-south orientation, pretty much aligned with the east side of your barge on the east property line of Fort Park, right in between the city and Grandstock. But the document that went to council that I saw had the barge orientated northwest southeast, which is the way you ended up with that, and it is now, if I recall driving down here. And I don't know how that location got changed between A and B, but I think you are flexible in where you can put that and where you can put that dock, and if we want to resolve that, I think we can without changing your operations.
So JD, I believe this is the one we saw at Harbor Commission?
Yes.
Yeah. And this revised one was what we took to council.
Right.
So there was a little miscommunication there. So this is what is important.
Is there some bone of contention with the way that it is now? Whether it was actually implemented, or is it just that it's different?
I believe there were some concerns from neighbors.
It appears to me that the south end of his barge, when it's spudded in there, is probably in grams right away. And that we shouldn't be doing. Tom has never said anything to me about it, and I don't believe he's contacted Victor. Did he say anything to you, Fred?
No, he didn't say anything about the position of it. But where the city had me put it, after we put it, where the Harbor Commission, I put it there first. And then when we moved it to the other location, I just noticed that the stern goes over the Graham line. I didn't think that was a good idea. I think it should stay within the city's area property rather than get over into Tom's. So that's the only beef I had with it, was to not be over on his property, his riparian area, stay at the city's riparian.
Yeah, I think we would all agree with that. Yes, no.
Going back to the topic about traffic and bayonet, I had individuals contact me that were concerned about the traffic going in and out. I was remiss in saying that there was people that contacted me. Did we get a complaint on it as it was happening? No, people just were concerned about the docks coming in and out and stuff like that. So,
With the forklift driving in the designated out section for the park.
those comments were made to me, you know, just in passing when I saw people, but as far as us getting the call saying, hey, it's blocking traffic, or we can't, I never received a call, we didn't receive a call.
I'm surprised you didn't get a ticket for going the wrong way to one-way street.
We had to pick up for parking.
Fred, if you move to using a trailer to move the docks, then you'd be following the
We
traffic
are, we're
control.
following the traffic rule.
So that problem would be mitigated for next year. Questions for Fred at this table? Then I'll move on. We have had a number of people respond with both positions for and against continuing the permit arrangement with Lawson Dock and Dredge. And you guys all have these in your packets. Most of these were published as letters to the editor. So you folks have seen it, but we have one here from Miles Trumbull in support of the service. One here from Steve Arbor in support of the service. One here from Gail Steffens. In support of the service. One from Martin Sutter in support of the service. One from Mark Rondell, who doesn't feel that Washington Dock and Dredge should be in Ford Park at all. One from Kerry and Dennis Wiggins, who, to sum up, says that they feel that it's a private business and should be kept on private property, not city property. And then we have a petition that was submitted to us a little bit ago, signed by around 100 people, and a packet that talked about a variety of things down, many of which we've already addressed, the boom heights, the congestion, those kinds of things. And their concerns in here, if I can briefly sum up, were noise during the day, of the fact that these docks were going up and down Bay Street. And remember also, folks, that the same number of docks used to go from Wastrom's property to private property across Bay Street last year. This year, they're a block away from that. So it's not like they're driving 3 miles with this stuff. It's, the work happened last year too. Now it happened a block away from where it is right now. We talked a little bit about the congestion, hazardous safety, but Kyle has addressed most of those. They talk about the view changing, and that absolutely is true. The barge moved about 200 feet from the west side of the Lawson property over to the east side of Ford Park. So the view improved in one area and changed in another. The folks who signed this petition also agreed that it's an essential community service. And that's a word that we used here at this table when we first put this together, because without, the work needs to get done. Without Lawson Dock and Dredge, there's going to have to be other plans made. And they're going to involve something with a lifting crane and some type of a boat that's going to be big enough to do the work that Fred does. So, and that work's essential for the city and for some of the private property. So this was submitted by a number of people, signed by a number of people with it, which is great. Back to the record also. And then we also recently got a letter from Susie Johnson, who said, please make sure my name is not on the ballot, which by ballot she means this petition, and her name is on. She says I was misinformed. I asked very intelligent questions about what location it was being moved to and if this would affect their work. And was told they had a location to move it to and that it would not affect their business. Apparently, this is not the truth. She goes on to say that she respects the Wallstroms, what they've done for boating over the years, and that she learned a lesson by not doing her own research on this. So from her perspective, she believes that the petition alluded to the fact that Fred had another option to go to. And you heard Fred state earlier that that just isn't true.
I'm Susie Johnson.
Oh, hi, Susan. Did I put any words in your mouth?
I appreciate you reading it. And all I want to say is, I moved here from California, but I have come here for 47 summers. And we live on Bay Street. And as I was waiting to come here today, realized out of anybody whose view probably changed, it would be my house. It's right there. And when you buy property on Bay Street, if you think that you have the right to stop the business that needs to be conducted on Bay Street so that people can have the life that they have moved here to have, then you shouldn't be living on Bay Street. So I thank you for reading it, and I stand very strongly with what I say in that.
Appreciate your attendance.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Hey, my name is Zach Jones. I'm one of the future owners of Dock and Dredge. And once we got word about the petition circulating, we decided we wanted to get the public opinion on the business and on our operation. We conducted an online survey that was fully anonymous, asked basic questions, and let people provide open feedback. And I have a few copies of that here, which I'd like to submit if that's all right.
Sure.
No, I don't. Thank you. And one more who wants to put it down here in the corner. But in total, we had 662 people respond to the survey, of which an overwhelming about 97% provided positive feedback on Dock and Dredge and its contribution to the city as well as its operation out of Fort Park, not having a negative impact on them personally.
So Zach, what you're saying is that Andy 661 times said that Wallstrom Dock and Dredge is necessary.
Yes, I have nothing better to do with my day.
So, the platform that we use, which is SurveyMonkey, does not allow duplicate responses. It tracks IP and won't let the same person respond multiple times. So there is a fail-safe built into the technology to make sure that these are all unique responses included. We had it be anonymous, that way people felt safe to provide honest, open feedback without feeling like be judged afterwards by whomever received this information.
Zach, I have a question. Why is a number 202 blacked out?
Okay, so yes, there is one redacted response in there. You can, I think, tell from what I left unredacted that it is a comment that was in favor of Wallstrom Dock and Dredge remaining at Fort Park. However, whoever decided to write that response was very enthusiastic and I think missed the mark on what we were trying to do, and I didn't feel like that their response was, while it was in favor, it wasn't helping the cause, so I chose to redact that in the official submission. No other responses to question 4 have been excluded from that. All questions were optional. No one had to answer all of them. So as you'll see, while there were 662, that number varies between each question on how many people answered it. I think there was a total of 202 responses to the open feedback question. Or more than that, I don't know.
Okay.
Thank you.
I don't think anybody at this table has seen this before. I know I haven't.
My first time.
So let me read through it. The first three. First one was, has the operation of dock and dredge at Fort Park negatively impacted you personally? 22 people, or 3%, responded yes. 639 people responded no, it did not affect me negatively. Question 2, do you feel DNP provides a necessary service in Harbor Springs and Little Traverse Bay? And there were 6 folks that said no, for less than 1%. 656 folks said yes. And the third question was, should the barge be available to the community in the event of a storm or damage to public or private property? Something we've seen more of in the last few years. And the answer there was 637 yeses and 19 noes. And then what follows next is probably 10 or 12 pages of comments that were, that you must have a comment section on them. And I did not fill this out.
Let me ask a question. How did you collect the responses? Would you target specific area? Did you target like Harbor Springs City? Did you just target follow the Facebook page? Or the resident? I mean, there's nothing here indicating a question such as if it was a resident who took the survey, or if it was someone who.
We kept it local to Harbor Springs. It was shared out via email to, permanent residents as well as, summertime residents. And then it was shared on social media. However, on social media, we asked that no one who was not in Harbor Springs complete the survey. If you read through the comments, it's very clear that the people who have taken it have a tie to this town. So while it wasn't a targeted deployment, we did choose who we were sending it to initially based on where they lived and what they did.
And it was highly encouraged that everyone share it with whomever.
Victor, to your point, it seems like the petition is primarily, but not exclusively, city residents. And we really don't know what this is. But we do know it wasn't Andy 636 times on the way.
And I can confirm that the city uses Survey Monkey for its survey.
Now, probably a quarter of the petition signers were not in the city. A majority of the city. And there was also, and did you get a copy of this from the first time I've seen this?
This one, no, this is the first time I've seen this one as well.
At any rate, she was in favor of the vote of the dock and dredge staying in Fort Park. Well, thanks for the information. So we've had considerable input on both sides of this, and
are we closing the public input part?
no, you gotta let me get to it.
That wasn't it.
We've had considerable written input, I guess maybe a better way to say that on this. And so this time I'd like to open the floor to anybody else who wants to ask something. Bill, why don't you step up?
No, actually, I know there's some other folks in the audience that did want to say something.
Before anybody speaks, I just need your name and address so I can reflect that in the record. Thank you.
Yes.
Hi, Gary Dwight. It's 465 Bay Street. I spent a little bit of time reviewing the Arbor Springs
Didn't you send a letter in?
Excuse me?
Didn't you send a letter in?
Yes, we did. You didn't mention that, but we did. There's a number of issues in there about the barge staying, the barge not staying, those things, and what might be done to mitigate some of the concerns that we had. Anyway, the master plan is very clear about what should happen. That there are 2 commercial sites in the city, and commercial businesses should be done in commercial sites. It also has a very specific emphasis on what happens on public sites in Harbor Springs, and that is the kind of predominant thing, particularly public spots. And anything that we can do to not disturb the views and activities in public places in the city were to be a priority. I would also like to point out something that has not been mentioned, and it's sort of water over the dam. But until relatively recent years, Judd Street went all the way to the water. And not so many years ago, that access to the water was removed and passed along to Irish Boat Shop. Would have been a really nice spot to have another water access that was public with a road. And I think that we do have two commercial businesses. I'm not privy to what went on between Dock and Dredge and the rest of Wallstrom Marine, but it appears that there certainly should be some civic responsibility between some of the people involved in this to get together and resolve their difficulties and remove this problem from a city problem. I mean, it really is kind of sad. There's a perfect place for the barge, was built for the barge, works perfectly, doesn't go down the street. And this set of circumstances is certainly unfortunate. And I can see that maybe it takes an arbitrator, I don't know, but some way to resolve that problem in a much more amicable way than it appears that it has. It seems very unfortunate. And certainly there are places, the barge sits not infrequently for a week without moving. There are other places it can sit besides Ford Park. And this week in particular, it was over at the point for the whole week. Not a problem. It could sit beside the Irish Dock. It could sit outside the dock. There are a lot of places it can sit besides Ford Park. So, thoughts?
Thank you for that input. Fred, we're probably working on the point this week, which is why the barge is over there.
Right.
You just need to go over and scud off and get on your bike and ride.
We should be going, getting it back and forth by small boat.
Appreciate your input.
Thank you.
And I'm sorry, I do remember your letter, but I did not have it in my packet, so I'm glad you
It
said
was,
something.
it was the one that came in the past couple of days.
Any other comment from the floor? Okay, great. Well, then, our job here at the table today is to weigh the input from the applicant, decide if we want to issue the permit or recommend issuing the permit for next year, because this will go up to council for the final decision. And if we do, are we happy with the language of the lease, or do we want to add some or subtract whatever terms to that arrangement? Pretty well sum it up. Well, I'll turn it over to the table. Yes, sir.
I guess I would start by saying 90 or 95%, certainly a mass majority are for this service, need the service. We have to have the service in Arbor Springs. The problem is where you put the thing. So until we come up with other ideas for it to go somewhere, I think the lease should be renewed.
I would like to add to that, just one of the main reasons we approved this was not because of the service it provides to other residents, but because the service Dock and Dredge does for the city's docks. That's why we considered Ford Park in the first place. Just want
Makes
to add
sense.
that to Jeff's comment.
Yeah, no,
I don't have the agreement in front of me. Is the target date for you to be off of the Ford Park property the 15th of June? Is that
That's in the original.
the original agreement? Is that something that you think is good Lord willing and the creek don't rise doable?
I would like to be more flexible, and have it later in June. And the September 15th is okay. But I think I need to go to the city and council, and would they make the last?
We just make
That'd
recommendations.
be the only change that I can see that we need to do what we do.
I have a question about if we went to June 22nd, because you were saying the city requires you not to work the last week of June. That gives them the last 7 days of the month that supposedly you're not here unless there are weather conditions that require it. If we went to the 22nd, would that be helpful to you?
Yes, it would. Yes. 30th would be the best thing for us.
We'll do that, Fred, but we're gonna have to give you the winning lottery number tickets too. Tim, you've been unnaturally quiet. You get paid to sit up here.
Yeah.
I'm looking for some feedback.
Where's that check?
It's in the mail.
I lean towards the keeping the service and here and Fort Park. My concerns are safety, which Fred has addressed with moving the components, using the trailer. I was going to ask you that earlier. That makes sense to me. I was hoping there was a way maybe we could find to get you busier earlier and out of there earlier.
That's our goal is to do that. We don't want to be there any longer than we have to because it just gets harder for us.
I did that.
So,
But again, I look at COVID and what it did. Our governor said, well, why don't you all go up to your cabins and do that? And people raised heck and said, then she said, okay, fire up your boats. And we had more boats on the waterfront earlier than ever. And, you know, the stocks of boats depleted quickly, and here we were. I think we can get through this and keep the service at the park, but the boom's got to be down. And we have to be considerate of everybody around us, all of us, boat users, Fred's people, and residents. It's just going to be, I don't see a way around this without incurring greater expense for the city and greater expense and inconvenience for some of the residents in the town. But we just have to find a way to make it function.
So we have a question for Fred. Earlier you said that you don't envision needing to be there often, perhaps through June 30th. So then why would you need it in the contract to say June 30th? Because I believe last time we just talked about that there's emergency or conditions that you can come back to the city manager to get approval to stay later. Why don't we consider adding some language to the contract that says maybe they have to come to the city council or the harbor commission if they would like to extend that June 15th period that's agreed to based on the season. Because if we agree to it right now, the weather could be perfect next year, but we could still technically stay till June 30th, even in good weather. So I mean, I think that's just something that I propose out there for the language.
Victor, I personally think that makes sense. I think the city has demonstrated its intent to work with the applicant as we did this year with it. I think we should also have the date that we want in there that we feel is a balance between the needs of the applicant and the needs of the residents, which is why I'm a fan of the June 15th one. And if the ice is here until the 15th of May, then we know that it's going to go longer. But so does everybody else in town, because we all see that. We're all here every day and we live it. This year, you could have got out of there by the 1st of June, if you could have started March 15th. So I would rather keep the date earlier, but allow flexibility for the city manager or however you want to handle that with input from us. And then go from there. That keeps Fred moving, and not that he needs to get on that, but I think it protects the residents as well. So, yeah, Tim.
I would like to agree with you on that, and that as long as there's the mechanism for either the commission or the city council to allow for mitigating circumstances such as weather and just who the heck knew COVID was coming.
well, my worst fear is not being able to put my customers down at all. And that would be a real nightmare. But, the time date comes and then it's like driving on the point, on the first of the month, you don't drive on the point, you gotta get stuff done. I'm under that same guideline. I can't go up there. And if weather or ice or something, I mean, we've put weather stock in when there was no ice but it was down the head of A. And then next week, it was packed full of ice. We didn't lose anything because it didn't come in that fast. But that's how quick we need to respond to what the conditions. Now, this last year, we didn't have hardly any ice at all. We should have had everything done weeks earlier. But then we couldn't go to work. So, but we've never been into July.
I think the earlier date is the most satisfactory because there is the mechanism for mitigating circumstances where you can come to the city and the city will say, we concur, you have a real problem and it's beyond your control. Bless you, Fred, move on.
Well, you remember the dredging guy, dredged and
Don't bring that.
frozen. I mean, that was terrible. It had happened in the spring. He wasn't supposed to be here in the spring at all.
JD, and can you just remind commission members and staff as well as public as what our alternatives would be if D&D was not located?
I was gonna talk about that when I got my turn to talk. The reality is, folks, is this work needs to be done. And it is gonna be done by somebody. That's all there is to it. We're a waterfront community, we have docks. And if you don't even take into account the folks who don't live in the city that need dock work that Washington Dock and Bridge provides, the city of Harbor Springs needs to have it. We can't function without a vehicle similar to what WD&D provides. So if we don't work with Mr. Wallstrom on this, even if the city decided to go into this business and do it itself, we would have to buy and staff some type of vehicle that would allow us to lift and store and move these pieces of dock around. That's all there is to it. So it isn't a matter of getting rid of the dock and then the problem goes away. Somebody else is going to come in. It's going to cost us all a lot more money. We're going to have less control. It's going to be somebody we don't know. They're not going to have the greater purpose of the city at heart at some level. So I think working with Wallstrom's is our best.
Well, there's been 4 years that I.
Now, I just paid you a compliment, so I'm don't worry about what you're going to say.
Thank you. I just want to say there's been 4 years that I did not bid on City of Petoskey's ice project works in the spring because I didn't think I would get my resort work done in time. So it's a tough, spring is tough. So that's why it's, we continue to push them. We work it, we'll get it done. We're doing it.
Look, you can comment, Michael, anything you want to?
I'm supportive of it. There have been a couple issues. I would have brought up the forklift going the wrong way into Ford Park, but you can correct that. You need to abide by the same rules that everyone else needs to abide by. Did watch Ford Park. I'm there virtually every day. The at Ford Park is almost overwhelming, but at the same time, Fred's only part of that because of the ferry service, the high water that came in, the COVID thing, we talked about all that. And it is, in my opinion, an essential service. I don't know who knows, but was it the Sunday after the barge left you called ruined my Sunday? Because the city dock came apart and Fred's barge wasn't here to fix it. So my crew had to go down there with a marginal piece of equipment and do a job that was slightly beyond the safe thing. So it is an essential service. I think it can work, and obviously I have an opinion on views on the waterfront. And I would only say that I think a barge is a pretty nice piece of equipment to look at. I agree the boom should be down, but this is a waterfront. That means there's kayaks and sailboats and power boats and fast power boats, and there's cars and there's ugly cars and there's trucks. It's what it is. And part of it would be thinking about adjusting your definition of a view. It's really actually pretty entertaining and interesting to watch professionals do what they do and do it well, whether that's Fred or the others. There is a ton of movement down Bay Street. Fred's part of it, I'm part of it, other people are part of it. It's what this city is. It's actually, we should be proud of it. it's a great waterfront. So, little bias there, but I'm fully supportive of what you're doing.
Understand. Bill, comments before we? Something that hasn't been said.
If it weren't for the harbor, we'd be Newberry, but that's right.
Okay, our job today then is to either vote to accept or to recommend to council that we continue the relationship by granting them another 1 year, 3 year, whatever, maybe year review is the best way to go at it. I don't know how everybody feels about that.
I'd ask for 10.
Well,
I mean, you guys can laugh at that, it's not a joke, I think that.
as a business,
As
I
a
would
new
think you'd want it
business
as
owner,
long
I'd
as
like
possible.
some security in knowing that I have a home to operate on it, that the city is in my corner and supports what Doc and Dredge is doing. Because as the third generation of Fred's family that's taking over this company, we want to stay for another 3. We want to be here and we want to help. So
I respect that, Zach, but I think you'll find with public contracts that those kinds of guarantees are very hard to get. But I understand where you're coming from. That's why I said 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, let's get started down this road and see where we are. What the city doesn't want to do is put ourselves in an arrangement where we are stuck with somebody also, in case things don't go so well.
understand.
We both need a little protection.
Had to ask.
So at any rate, I think from what I heard from consensus is that everybody would like to see the boom be down, let's add that to the contract. I also would like to see myself and maybe staff would also some type of penalty in case things aren't done like they're supposed to be done, like the boom isn't down or that you end up parking a truck down there. I know this won't happen, so it shouldn't affect you, but there ought to be some recourse for the city to follow if the parameters aren't met like they should. But that's just my opinion, whatever everybody else thinks of it. Yes.
I will move that we recommend a 1 year lease with penalties if the boom is not down in the evening or if there are other violations.
Can I ask one question? Fred, is there any reason why we couldn't stipulate that as long as that barge is unmanned, the boom would be down? That means the last man off that's his responsibility.
That's
You
what
got-
we've been doing.
Well, it didn't always work. I mean, this
No,
is,
but that's what we're doing now.
Okay.
I mean, we weren't of the understanding that it had to be down all the time. So now that we understand what the scope of this thing is, that's what we're doing. When we walk off the job, we have boom. But we don't put the boom down on our point. In other words.
Well, you're not in the
no,
city.
we're talking about when you're here.
We're not
in
at the
Fort
city
Park.
city launchroom. And it's wear and tear. I mean, it's, constantly moving shifts and moving parts, stretching cables. And so I understand that. But, yeah, we put the boom down when we leave. It's standard operating procedure at this point. Not hard to do.
So we have a motion from Flicka that would recommend a 1 year continuation of this permit with 2 stipulations. One is boom is down when it's stopped at Ford Park, and the second would be that we add appropriate penalties in case any of the terms of the contract aren't met. And we can leave that up to the city manager, city attorney to figure out that on it. But I have not heard a second on that.
I'd second that.
And a second from Jeff. Any further discussion here at the table? And my only comment is I would love to see this be a 2 year lease, longer than 1 year. We did a trial period with them. I think they've earned a shot at something a little longer. It's not 10 as the applicant would like, but maybe it's a step in the right direction. And I think we could structure the contract with Raymer's help that if the terms aren't met, then we go into arbitration if we aren't happy with the second year, so we are pinched if we need it.
Would you change yours to 2 years? I'm in favor of that.
I'm not opposed to it, so I guess I'm in favor of it also.
Then we would need to re-second your second motion.
That's you.
I would re-second my second motion. I do need to ask one stupid question. How long does it take to raise that boom and lower that boom? Is it a 5-minute deal?
Anytime at all.
Andy's driving was pretty quick.
It's pretty quick, yeah. It's just hard on the equipment to go all the way down and stay that way all night and then have to bring it back up.
Okay, I have a
So
mo-
Nick, we had a motion by Flicken, a revised motion by Flicken. Did we get a second on revised motion?
we have a second by Jeff James.
Okay, do you want to read that to make sure we're all clear? And Laura and Fred, on the intercom, do you guys have any comment on this?
No, it's mine, thank you.
I'm good.
Thank you. Let's read that again, then, Nick.
Motion by Reagan, seconded by James to recommend a 2-year lease with penalty to be determined by the city if boom is not down when not in use
At Ford Park.
at Ford Park.
I would say with penalties that have to do with any of the violations of the contract, including, I don't think you have to specify, just so you have some recourse if there's something. We protect the citizens because there's motivation for them to do the right thing. Michael, you had a question?
Does this lease payment go to the waterfront fund?
It better.
Yes.
Yeah,
It's-
I just wanted to hear the words, that's all.
That boy. That boy.
Who waterfront goes?
Hope so. It's gonna get you, I'm not gonna go. All right, motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? If not, Nick, we'll do a roll call vote.
Yeah, Michael Esposito,
Yes.
Laura Coors,
Yes.
Jeff James,
Yes.
Dick Schiller, Flicker Reagan,
Yes.
Bill McCullough,
Yes.
Jim Bartlett,
Yes.
Tim Fletcher Rice,
Yes.
and Fred Rockwitz.
Yeah.
Motion carried.
Okay, thank you. Folks, number one, no matter how you felt about this, the input was wonderful. It's good to hear from everybody in town, no matter what side of the fence you are with this thing. I respect, and I think everybody here at the table does too, your opinions on this. We certainly pay attention to that when we think about things. And I'd encourage you to do that no matter what the issue is as we move along in our waterfront. So thank you for your time and concern with this thing. And now this will go to council, probably the next council meeting.
The next one's on Monday, so we want to have this Monday, probably November sometime.
All right, great. And they really are the final word. We'll just an advisory body on this. We'll go from there. So thank you. You're welcome to leave if this was the reason you were here.
Thanks,
We
everyone.
lost the first
Thank you,
row.
guys.
What about us?
Now we're back to manage by number.
We can go ahead and place it here.
There's a lot of. Okay, next item up is the Little Traverse Ferry Foundation license renewal on this. And Victor had a little comment in here, and in it, he says that he's not heard very many complaints about the ferry operation in relation to using Ford Park. I think we've all seen how good they are at breaking 6x6s down there, to the point where they quit being repaired, and we just put a big bumper up there and hope for the best. There was some, and Kyle, I'm gonna look for some comment from you, but I know there was some more parking issues down there. Was it related to the ferry that you could tell, or?
I put together some numbers.
Oh, great.
Whether you like them or not, over the last 3 years for Ford parking. So in 2018, we wrote 14 parking tickets in Ford Park. In 2019, we wrote 42 parking tickets in Ford Park. And in this last year, we wrote 219 parking tickets in Ford Park. Well, we had, well, it was 218, 211 were my boss, beautiful employees. No.
Probably contractors and subcontractors.
No, they were not. Actually, a lot of that was attributed to, we had 68 no launch permit tickets this last year. So we wrote more no launch permit tickets than we wrote the last 2 years combined.
That's awesome.
So as reference to, I look at the problem of parking at Ford Park comes down to 5 things. First of all, no offense to Mike, goes to construction ideas. They took up about 5 or 6 spots every day. More voting activity It was by far, this is my fourth summer, but it was by far the ferry, I felt had a minimal amount. And then there's some charters that go out of there. And we wrote a few to some of the charters. There'd be the 4-hour parking. And then the last point, which I embarrassed or maybe good or bad, is we have a difference in staff. And our guys were a little bit more aggressive this year. And the staff that we had, it was something that we took, we wanted to make sure we got some complaints, so we took it serious and we went down there and we took care of we tried to take care of some of the problems. So probably that was a good 20%. My staff's younger right now, they're a little more aggressive and they walk faster.
They can actually get out of the car.
But I asked them that we did it almost every day. And in the past, we wouldn't do that, so that probably showed it a little bit of that. But it wasn't direct, my opinion is it wasn't reflective of the fair.
Well, personally, I was glad to see the higher level of enforcement down there for parking. So my hat's off to that.
Are the charters you mentioned charters that have licenses with the city for being charters?
I have no idea. All I know is that periodically I get a call saying, we went on a charter, they leave in the morning, they come back in the afternoon, and or late morning, we written them a ticket for it's a 4-hour.
Yeah, it could be. That
There's at
the
least
boat
two.
is next door.
Yeah.
At Graham's, you're saying.
So I don't know where, all I know is that I've gotten calls.
Just checking.
Yep.
Well, Bill asked the question because if they operate out of Fort Park, the city property, they're supposed to have a license with the city.
I don't
think we have any of those licenses out right now.
No.
Okay.
So this would be customers of the charter, but not the charter itself.
Exactly, yep.
All right, but to the question at hand, related to the ferry operation down there, there really wasn't a significant impact.
Nope, not at all.
That's kind of what I saw.
We see a lot of foot traffic going on B Street, walking downtown. A lot of it.
It would have been nice if we'd have had the pedestrian walkway painted on the bottom of that loop, but I know why it didn't, because it was so wet down there through the high water that they couldn't get the paint to dry on that thing. But once they got across that, they did stick to that new sidewalk pretty well from my observation. And we got them off of the loop, which was good, because before they used to walk right down that. So we did make some progress.
And if there's anything that you guys could support is just more parking spots down there. I think with some funding or whatever we could do, we could, not that 8 or 10 is going to increase, but we have the room to put 8 or 10 parking spots down there. And that would definitely be beneficial.
Kyle, we have talked about that for quite a long
Sorry,
time. The question was, how do we pay for it? Is that a waterfront issue? Is it a city issue and that kind of stuff? But certainly with the increased demand down there, and we've got some kayak things to talk about too, that we got to consider that.
And I'm going to get with Michael. We need a little bit better way now that there's so much boating activity. We need a little bit better way of doing a lot from it. I think that just the way they are, people come, they have their boat, they don't see them, whatever it is, that we need to, there's like an honor system that I don't necessarily know people are honoring.
The daily permits?
Yeah.
Yep, we talked about that.
Yeah, it's just something that we need to do administratively.
Victor, from the city's perspective, did the ferry company meet all of their contractual obligations with us?
Yes.
Both financially and in terms of the agreement? And are they in good standing with their other partners, Petoskey and Bay Harbor?
There was concerns from Petoskey that they didn't pay in time, but I think they eventually got their payment in.
They did, it was part of the grant, yeah. It took a lot longer than we expected it to.
So they did, but I did hear from Kendall, and correct me if I'm wrong, you may be changing where you're overnighting.
Yeah, this summer we had 2 overnight spots, one in Petoskey and one in Bay Harbor, and we exclusively used Bay Harbor, so we paid for a slip essentially that we didn't use.
So that was our only concern, because last year we made this contingent on ensuring that they had somewhere else to overnight, because we didn't want to have a ferry or no one overnight. So that was my only recommendation, if we do that somewhere. We should
Would you guys like to make a few comments on this too before I turn it over to the table?
Sure. I mean, it was definitely a challenging year, launching in the year of COVID, but I think overall it was a very resounding success. We have, since June 25th through the 10th of October, we have had over 6,885 one-ways. So that was a pretty significant number of passengers. Given the fact that we had to reduce the number of seats on the ferry itself from 49 to 30.
Did that result in the loss of some customers? Because there weren't seats?
Very few, you know, we haven't, we
So actually,
didn't,
you were able to accommodate.
thankfully, yeah, we really didn't have to, other than there was one, right out of the gate, we had to deal with some COVID issues and some, you know, social distancing. But other than, I mean, it was a great summer overall, I have to say, it was really, really good. The numbers in and out of Harbor Springs are really strong. And I have these and I can send these to you guys too. I only had a few complaints from people coming out of Harbor that they couldn't find the dock or they didn't know, like it was so far for them to walk. But other than that, Harbor's been a seriously, supportive community, and Bay Harbor has supported Harbor Springs and vice versa. I mean, the numbers show it was very strong. I'm very surprised, happily surprised. There has been a lot of requests for originating out of Harbor Springs. Maybe on a certain day of the week or a couple times a week so that they can depart from Harbor Springs earlier to get to the other ports. But aside from that, we've been very positive. Yeah.
So you're teed up to operate again next year?
We are.
That's our goal. There's financially, it was a very big hardship paying for the dock, paying for the boat and having the numbers are incredible, but we didn't get to continue as much as we wanted to. So looking at ways to try to increase the revenue to pay for the debt service throughout the year. But I mean, our plan is to be operational and active next year. Right now, we're on point to do that. So Golf Valley on Thursday if you want to go support.
We're definitely going to do a lot of fundraising over the course of the winter so that we can support it. There's a lot of mechanical upgrades that we want to embrace, and of course the cost of running is.
I was happy to see the Coast Guard get so involved in the ferry. They were down there multiple times and gave us checklists to make sure we took care of, and those things were addressed and taken care of and reported back to the Coast Guard. So I really, that piece made me feel a little more comfortable that the Coast Guard was so involved. They would call and do random stop-bys and just say, I'm here to check out the boat, So that part was a good hindsight that they do that.
JB, I have a question. So I know this is your first year, and so there was been some unexpected things, and so there's some changes in the schedules, like arriving and departing. So I think one thing I guess I would ask for is next year, is when you come back, is to just bring a set schedule, when you know your set schedule,
Sure.
so that we can anticipate when there'll be.
Trust me, I think it was harder on us than you.
I realize how I did that, yeah.
A lot of that became because of staffing issues. We had we teed up 8 captains at the beginning of the season, and because of the Coast Guard not licensing it, throughout the year. In fact, they just started at the end of September, starting to issue and update their licenses. We were really strapped with captains. Deckhands we were primarily okay with, but for captains it was really tough. And so, of course, trying to accommodate everyone's schedule, but we already have 5 on contract for next year, and we already have schedules kind of figured out. The only thing that would really change is if we could accommodate some origination out of another city, like, Harbor Springs outbound first thing, but, just right now, we're planning on just exclusively departing from Bay Harbor like we did this year, and we'd like to run the 7-day schedule from 9 to, dusk, essentially. Right out of the gate, the first 2 weeks were perfect. 7 days a week, 9 a.m. to 11 p.m. I mean, it was strong, the weather was perfect, and then it kind of fell apart. The weather kind of took a toll on us, but.
Comments from the table? Yes, Rick.
I have a question in the contract on page 6 about no use of horns. I don't know whether I'm crazy, but I kept thinking that you were using a horn to announce your departure and your arrival. And I'm wondering if the document you cited requires that's a Coast Guard requirement, so that they're asking you not to do so is in violation of the rules.
Well, we do in our desk section later, we say, except as otherwise required by law. So we say no use of horns unless there's another law that says they have to.
So is there?
Federal law would supersede any
Yeah.
Yes,
local.
so there is a law that requires it. Okay, I just wanted to be sure.
From my perspective, I thought the service went well. The captains were very respectful, no wake. I never saw the boat handled irresponsibly. I watched with regularity on that. And eventually figured out the best way to have the dock work at Ford Park for you, but that's,
Yeah, that's a little challenging. Those 6x6s are not big enough to handle. Yeah, we kept breaking sticks. In Petoskey too, that boat was built so that it would actually dock against the rub rail, which is like significantly, 4 feet above the tile, the height of the piling. So we have to really work on some
There's gonna be
logistics there.
that, we're meeting with Kendall to have a, what went well, what went bad meeting as well in
Yeah.
Petoskey. We're gonna change the dock over there, there's probably some type of rub rail as well. The pylons, the 6x6 pylons that we had, when they got knocked off, they were held on by, leg bolts that weren't very big, so the rub rail hopefully will correct that problem.
so personally, I thought you guys did a good job.
Thank
you. I'm in favor of recommending the council that we extend. And I don't know that I have any changes to the terms in there, other than to make sure that some of the advertising I saw on your website talked about private charters. And you're more than welcome to do that from Petoskey or Bay Harbor, but if you do that out of Harbor Springs and you pick up and discharge in Harbor Springs, you should be aware that you do need to have a separate permit. And the one that we issue you does not cover that kind of stuff. There's a limited number of those. So,
Thanks for the heads up.
Jay, I'd also add that if we're considering renewing it, that we also talk about the length of the contract. I know you did Wallstrom's 2 years, but is there more comfortable with going different?
would you guys, would you like something more than a 1-year deal? If I were you, I should.
2-year would be great, if that's
I think that-
appropriate.
Well, let's see how everybody else feels here at this table, but I see some nodding masks. So that's good.
I'll make the initial motion
Fire away.
that we offer the ferry service a 2-year contract
With the same
with
terms.
the same terms.
License would be
You don't have to buy another dock.
$1,000 fee.
Oh, thank God. I was getting the pitch ready for that fundraising.
So
Second,
Motion's been made by Tim, seconded by Dick. Any further discussion at the table? Laura, Fred, you guys hear all this? Fred, wake Laura up and ask her if she heard all this.
I heard all of this.
All right.
Yeah.
Let's do a roll call vote.
JD, is it in the public that want to comment?
Oh, I'm sorry, not paying attention. John, did you have your hand up?
I've got a question for the
Yes.
commission now. In the same terms, does the commission feel that's a fair rate for years 2 and 3 compared to what Wallstrom's paying on top rate their business out of the park? Or,
Wallstrom's didn't buy us a $60,000 dock. And that's my personal.
Well, and the rate is also established by our rules and regulations, where we didn't have a rule and regulation rate for this type of activity in Boston.
And they have very little, there's no hauling of equipment, there's no, and we did require Wallstrom's to spend almost $8,000 on that little driveway improvement we put in there to take care of their own stuff.
Plus a $5,000.
Yeah.
So this license fee is $1,000, I believe. That's in our regulations.
And I'm sure that's what they are anticipating too.
Thank you.
do you have a motion to have a second?
Are you ready for a roll call?
If you guys are ready, I'll do
Unless
it.
there's any other questions. I'm sorry, I missed you. Fire away.
Fred Rockwitz.
Yes.
Tim Fletcher Rice.
Yes.
Jim Bartlett.
Yes.
Bill McCullough.
Yes.
Flicka Reagan.
Yes,
Dick Schiller.
Yes.
Jeff James.
Yes.
Laura Coors.
Yeah.
And Michael Esposito.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Great. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
hope you have this better year next year with it, and we look forward to working with you
And
guys.
just a reminder, is with the Wallstrom, we are taking this to council eventually for them to get approved.
And this will be at that same meeting, probably more.
Yeah.
First one in November.
Yeah. First or second, let's see.
But just shoot me an email.
Yeah.
And you can come and sit through those.
I'd love to. But you guys never order beer. You keep running.
Next item on this incredible agenda tonight is discussion on kayak storage space review. Victor provided some input that was generated at the Harbor Commission meeting that I missed. Sorry about that. And I guess what you did, Victor, is ask us, based on a request from some folks, to add
Carol, yeah, she's there.
Good for you. So correct me if I sum this up wrong. For more kayak rack storage on some city facility on there. And then Victor, you went out to your staff and asked for comments and suggestions on that.
Yep.
And the result of that is this document that we have in front of us today on this.
And there's a second thing, there's a more kayak store space and or changing the system for how we determine who gets that space and when.
On the waiting list. So let's deal with the storage space first, and then we'll, just like you have it listed here, go from there. So to start off, I think it's important for everybody here, both at the table and in the audience, to realize that the city of Harbor Springs has been and continues to be a huge supporter of kayaks, kayak usage. More so by a factor of 10 than any waterfront community I know of on the Great Lakes. Michael, how many spaces do we have?
76.
We have 76 spots in various spots around the city that are for kayaks. I don't know where you can go anyplace else at a public facility and find room for 7 or 1 on that. We have been very, very receptive to this. And while we have had requests from other waterfront users like lasers or sunfish users, or at one time it was Hobie cats and windsurfers and all that kind of stuff. This has been something we've reacted to and provided, and it's a success. We have a waiting list of somewhere around 35 or 40 people now.
37 names, as of
37 on that, and it's important that we all understand that while you can do something someplace on a piece of city property, it doesn't mean that you should. From my perspective, this whole thing is about balance down in the water. And while we could add relatively easily and inexpensively more kayaks in other places around there, again, and I'm speaking personally on this, the question is, should we? It increases the parking, it increases the congestion, it lends toward one user at maybe the expense of others. And we have to be careful that we balance these competing interests. You know, our dock waiting list is huge on this. Our mooring waiting list is huge. But we haven't gone into, and we could build another dock down there. We could go east of the east dock, get rid of the 2-hour dock, put something in there. But we haven't done it because of concern for site and usage on it. And primarily because the shoreside facility is necessary to make that happen, we just don't have the space for it. The parking's not there, we have to increase the bathroom sizes, et cetera, et cetera. And we can increase the density of the mooring field too, and reduce that waiting list to a more manageable number. Because we have the ability to control that area with at least arrangement with the state. But we haven't, because use requirements in there would make it harder for the Little Traverse sailors, for example, to sail into that area. And for the folks who use the harbor and not a area, it's more congested. And because we don't have the shoreside facilities, because we are constrained to provide the parking spaces and those kinds of things. So while you can, my point is, while you can do these kinds of things, and we're physically able to do that, just because we can doesn't mean we should. And from my perspective, it's all about balance. And I look at this, I think we have been very, very good as a community to kayakers. And that needs to be taken into consideration as we explore this request. So So let's deal with the request for more spaces on this. I mean, how does everybody else feel? After I just wrote it out, sorry to do that, but I think about this a lot, and that's important to say. So comments from the table about where we want to go.
Well, I'm on a similar page. I think we've been generous to that particular group of users, and it's disproportional to other users, which may or may not be an issue right now. Arguably, you could even be more efficient at the space we use, but all of these other things come in. And right now, especially at Ford Park, we, the city, has put so many things into that park. It really is stressed. So more kayak racks will just stress it some more. Maybe that's a bigger issue for us to deal with, but at this point, there's multiple ways to deal with the waiting list. One of them is build more racks, the other is to raise the price. There's different ways to look at it. So I'm not personally at this point in favor of adding more racks specifically at Ford Park. If there are other places to look for it, I'm more open to that. I don't know where those are.
And I was talking to Michael Johnson when our staff was discussing this, and the committee was formed, I believe, in 2017 to look at the exact issue, and the 3 locations were really east side of Zoll Beach, double racks at IBS at Fort Park, or extending of that existing racks at IBS to the north. And this Harbor Commission City ended up going with the third option of extending to the north because of congestion issues at Zoll Beach and other concerns there. So, yeah, just want to put that out there. So those were the other locations that we discussed previously.
How much turnover is there, Michael? In other words, what's an average? Do 3 people a year give up their spot and somebody can move up, or?
That's probably a pretty good number, Jeff. We were fortunate last year. We actually gained 4 spots from people who just gave up kayaking altogether. 2 of those folks, and then we had 2 people that just decided that $150 is too much to spend for a kayak spot that used to be $100. So that affected some of that. But turnovers, it's pretty glacial, I guess, for lack of a better word. Pretty much similar to the mooring field and similar to the dock space. So the wait list is a wait list.
I remember a long time ago, maybe 15 years ago, I think his name was Bill Brogan. He was on the city council. And he came up with an idea on the mooring field that everybody had to pay a $10 fee every year. And I don't know how much administration this takes to do this, but I remember it knocked a lot of people off because people forgot their name was even on that list.
So that was in 2007.
Actually, Jeff, we've done that at least 3 times I can think of in my term on this, where we would go through the docks and the moorings and ask for an increase that we would hold, and then when they got their slip or mooring, we gave it back to them to make sure that the list was honest. We probably haven't done that in
2007. That was the last time we did that.
So maybe it's time for us to do that.
And I'm not talking about the mooring field, I'm just talking about the kayaks, but.
But we would include the kayak
Yeah,
thing.
maybe you could
we
weed
should
a
do
few out with that or
We
something.
did not include the kayaks the last time we did that. We did not do that.
I don't think it was an issue.
No, it was not at that point.
That's why we didn't include it.
That might clean that list up a little bit, and if 5 people drop off because they moved, they're not around anymore, I'm with Michael, I don't want to see any more racks or anything, I don't think. It's too congested.
Look, guys.
I've got a question. I think it was at the last meeting that we talked about this, and one of our people from the public commented that she had sort of surveyed how many kayaks were off the racks on any given day, and that there were lots of kayaks that seemed not to be being used at all. And I'm wondering, if there's some way we can find out or know which people these are and ask if they really want to stay on the rack. If we really have, 37 people who want to be active kayakers in the harbor, and we have people on the wrecks that don't put their kayak in the water at all, I don't think kayaks congest the harbor too much. But I think maybe they're using wrecks and not using the kayaks.
Okay, I think that's a good point, except that they affirm that they want to be there by paying their fee every year.
Right.
So.
Do that with the rate.
I think
So even if they don't use
that's
it,
the way to do it.
I think that's more of the question though, is should people be allowed to take up space if they're not going to be kayaking, or if they're only kayaking once or twice, which I think is 2 different questions. I mean, we've talked about that with slippage and moorings as well, and that's a different question.
I would imagine it would be a horrible enforcement thing to try and do. I just can't see a
Yeah.
positive outcome on that.
When was the last rate increase for kayak storage?
3 years ago, I believe.
I thought it was last year.
Just last year.
If it was last year, it was not this.
You should also consider that raising kayak rates makes it less accessible for people who maybe have less money to necessarily access the water. You gotta think about,
About $150 to have your vessel at waterfront is bargain basement.
of course,
I mean, that's very, very, very inexpensive.
I'm just saying we just have to think of the entire community.
Is that limited to residents only, or is it open to anyone?
It's open ended.
Because there's another potential option, I guess, if we do that.
So we have beat this up a little bit here, but I'm sure you have some comments.
I want to beat up this too, Laura.
Okay, Laura, hang on. Let's,
Okay.
hang on just a second.
Yeah, I'd just like to make a couple points, because I did have the opportunity at the last meeting and heard the same pushback, but I did track the usage of kayaks, and for all the days, and I got them all written out there, the most kayaks that were off any of the racks on any given day was 4. It ranges from 0 kayaks off racks to one day that there were 4. So I think what people are doing is they're using this as the place they store their kayaks instead of putting them in a garage or somewhere else. So for those, like if you saw that list, one person's been on the list now 7 years to put their kayak out. I'm number 25, my sister's number 26. I'll be over 70, and I'm not joking, by the time my name comes up, based on the turnover right now. So that's one frustration, because whoever has these kayak racks, I think, has had them for years and just keeps their kayaks there. They never use them. Second of all, the parking issue is gonna be exacerbated, and it is now, because this year, for me to use my kayak, I borrowed a friend's pickup truck and kept the kayaks and then took up a parking spot. Where if I could park, if I had a rack there, I would bike down to use my kayak. But I can't carry my kayak from where I live on Snyder Street down there, so instead, I borrowed a friend's pickup. Next year, if I can't use this pickup, I'm gonna buy a trailer. So then I'm gonna take one of there's
Not very many.
X number of trailer spots. So instead of just carrying my kayak off the rack, I'm going to take one of the trailer spots that the boats need in order to use my kayak. So it doesn't, it's not logical to me that it's a pushback based on parking issues. And so I guess my other suggestion is if we're not gonna get more racks, and we're already tight on parking, because a lot of times I had to go park on Main Street, like drop the kayak off, turn around, park on Main Street, kayak, and then reverse myself when I got back in kayaking, is to do the lottery. Because there are people, I'm guessing, that have had those kayaks on those same racks for 25, however long you've had racks,
Let's,
and never used their kayaks.
great work on that. In fact, I would apply to Victor for a job next year in case we decide to watch every user of it.
No, I
Got the
mean-
system down.
JP,
I walk every morning, so I jotted it down every day.
Carol, another question about, when you went to the Fort Park to observe, were you doing it like a daily basis, were you going at specific times? I'm sure you can get the details of which different kayaks were being used, because there might be 4 used one day, but 4 different ones used the next day.
There was only one day that there were 4, and that was August 4th at 3:40.
But you get what I'm saying, that, not everyone's gonna be using their kayaks every single day, someone might only use it once a week, so you might have 2 different ones off on Wednesday, and 2 different people use it on Thursday. And then what times were you doing it as well?
All day, I've got 1:45, 3:20, 11:45, 3:15, 2 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 8:30 a.m., 8 a.m., 2:15. I mean, because it's whenever I was either walking, biking, kayaking, and I would jot it down and say there's
0 kayaks out at Dole and 1 at Ford Park. And I did it for weeks.
Just wanted to get that.
Nancy?
I'm Nancy Rundle, across the street. Just a couple thoughts about kayaks, because I also kayak. I'm fortunate, I walk down, I have wheels, I walk down, I live right across the street. But my first question is, why were the kayak racks, like given for life? I mean, in the first place, why was that decision made saying this morning if you want to go there? And the second issue for me is residents in town, permanent voting residents, maybe should have first shot at some of those racks. I think it could definitely be a perk for being an in-town person. It also would maybe encourage people who could just walk to the rack and get in the lake and do it. It might help with the parking issues too. So just a couple things to think about, you know.
Let's talk about your first question first.
Okay.
They were handled similar to how most municipalities handle wait lists for whatever use it is on waterfront stuff. In the Great Lakes, we don't have a length of time that we have for somebody who gets a mooring. Once you're awarded a mooring, until you get out of boating, so to speak, and well, the city reserves the right to not offer that to you, we customarily have, and the same with docks. And that's because folks wait a long time to get to those positions where they get it. And that's the way it's evolved over the years at most businesses that have those kinds of things. And it seems to make the most sense, because to have a lottery where you know you've got your spot for, pick a time period, 5 years, just causes, at the end of that 5-year period, confusion, where do they go next? You don't eliminate the problem of somebody not getting there, you just make it easier for somebody else to get on, but at the expense of somebody who waited longer than that individual to get there. So that's kind of where we are. As to a different price break or a preference to city residents, I think we probably could do that if that was the want of council. We can't do that with dockage or moorage in terms of access because of arrangements with the state. We can do it with fees on moorings, which is why the city residents has a less fee on that. The state allows us to do that, but they don't allow us to do it at the dock. So we have in those two things done everything we can to try and make it as available for city residents preferentially over outside of town folks. The kayaks, I think we would probably have the ability to do whatever we wanted to do if we have a little bit of a relationship with them.
Well, and I would just, my thought, a 5-year span on a kayak spot. A lot of people will kayak for a certain number of years and then stop kayaking. And you've got a wait list of 37 folks waiting, some of them have waited a really long time. It just, to me, would make sense to flip those every 5 years, 3 years, whatever. Would be appropriate.
Well,
It's
I
just a
appreciate
thought,
the suggestion.
yeah, something to look at, as a different way of handling these long, many-year wait lists on the kayak.
And you were suggesting that we do that with dockage and moorage?
I would have to look at, I don't know, do I really want to get in, that's a hot button item. I think it's more complicated with that because you have someone with a, 25-foot boat that has nowhere to put it. That's a little bit more of an issue than a kayak that can go in the garage if you have a spot.
A mooring holder and a dock holder do not have other options that a kayak holder might.
I think they're two different things.
Just wanted to know what you were thinking.
When is the summer?
I'm sorry, hang on, Jeff. Yeah, Sheriff?
I'm sorry.
I have a kayak down there. It's a 2-person kayak. It's a Hobie, big plastic one, and it's heavy. I use it with my kids, my grandkids. It would be extremely challenging for me to pull it from, I live up the hill near you, down, or have my grandkids do it. So I have been blessed to have a kayak slip for many years. And I cherish that. I understand your concern about the wait list. I was on a wait list for a boat slip for 20 years. But I would I don't think a lottery for 5 years would be the best answer, in my opinion, for my situation, because of how I use that kayak. It's, like I said, it's not a single person kayak, and we use it all different times of day, days of the week, et cetera. So, you know, if that's, your usage report is very interesting, and I applaud the fact that you took the time and energy to do that. I think it's challenging to really figure out who's using them when, so, from what I've seen.
I guess the bottom line kind of is that it's not gonna solve the parking issue by not adding racks. But if the decision is to do that, it will just necessitate people to buy trailers and then take one of the trailer spots, and that's,
Right,
I
and
guess,
then
what my sister
if
and I
there is no
would do,
place
we
to
don't
park
have
their
enough
car in the
choice.
trailer, then they can't go, just like we have it right now. You know, we don't build the town to have a parking spot on the 4th of July. But you have to understand when you're really busy, you may not be able to get to exactly where you want to go. That's just life on that. Yeah.
My question, I guess it's to Michael, what time of year, when do you all bill out this $150 fee for the kayak rental spots?
Typically, those go out the 1st of March.
I wonder if it'd be advisable or an idea to put a simple questionnaire, ballot, whatever you want to call it, in this billing. You know, how many times a year do you use your kayak? Do you anticipate keeping this rack for more than 5 years? Whatever the questionnaire is, maybe 10 questions or something like that. Maybe that would help dictate a direction for this issue.
I guess I'd leave that up to the commission. I mean, I don't see the problem with that, but I guess that would be entirely your decision, so.
I think staff wants to generate some information. If they feel that's a worthwhile thing, that's a great time to do it. So, let's get back to the first question, which is the commission in favor of increasing the number of kayak racks? Let's, oh, and Laura, you wanted some feedback on it, or some comment on this, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I wanted to add just 2 things again. I am fortunate I was on the wait list for a long time. I got a rack. When I got my rack, I absolutely, if I had to go portion one, so now I invested more because I had a place to put it. So, second, I disagree with your numbers. I am out there 171. There were 6 of us that all kind of came in at the same time, and almost there, which is beyond their too. But your only 4 people does not compute with me as a user. Maybe we're different times. I'm an early girl. I'm out there at 7:30 or 8:30. A group of us from the goal would go there. So, just awareness, because it's not what I know. I've always done a dinner. One money than one fifty. It's the wrong thing to do.
Great, thank you.
I would like to add something.
Fire away, Fred.
2 things. Is there any possibility of putting racks up in other city properties, specifically I'm thinking by the church parking area of Pennsylvania Avenue that would be reasonably close, certainly not as late as having to the shore, but you could carry from there. And the second one, is there a way we can encourage people to be able to have better access, but have to bring their kayaks down with them, pulling behind a hand trailer or a car trailer or on the roads or something? And I'm thinking at any of the locations, but I've also wondered whether the west end of the public beach would be any possibility. We have a lot of waterfrontage there, and it seems like the very west end of that is not well used. Just a thought.
Thank you. Let's address the first question. Does the commission want to increase the number of kayak spaces that we have now? I think that's a paramount question.
I'm against that only due to the fact that I think it brings in more traffic, more car traffic. It takes up spaces for, hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever it is. I'm against that.
You don't need a motion on this, do you? I mean, we don't really have an action item on this. Do you want to just hear everybody's individual comments, and if we don't come to a conclusion, then we do a motion?
Take off if you want. Or do something.
Pardon me?
Okay.
She's talking somebody.
No.
I'm not,
Lunch, dinner.
I guess we're looking for a recommendation to staff, but we don't necessarily need a motion, but I mean,
All right, motion's easy though, then we get everybody out there. Does anybody want to float a motion, or I'll make one? One way or the other.
So you want a motion to not change what?
To whatever you would like to do, to either increase the number of racks, in which case we'll start looking at how many and where, or to maintain the number that we have now, in which case we'll move on to the wait list discussion.
Well, I'll be the bad guy and make the motion that says, I don't think we should increase the number of kayak racks at this time.
And I would second that.
We have 2 seconds. I don't know if you were second or third.
I was gonna try to make the motion.
So Nick, we've got a motion.
Yep.
Everybody clear on it? Let's do a roll call. Fred and Laura, did you hear that?
Yes.
Yes, but is this under the assumption that any additions would be at current rack location?
The motion is to not increase the number of kayak storage racks. Let's see if that passes. If it doesn't, then we'll go from there. Okay, Nick, go ahead.
Michael Esposito,
Yes.
Laura Kors,
A yes vote means we're not adding racks.
Correct.
So
Right.
everybody's clear.
Laura Kors,
Yes.
Jeff James,
Yes.
Dick Schiller.
Yes.
Flicker Reagan,
No.
Bill McCullough,
Yes.
Jim Bartlett,
Yes.
Tim Fletcher Rice,
No.
and Fred Rockwitz.
No.
Motion carried to not add additional racks.
That answers that question. Then let's move on and see if there's anything we want to do to the kayak wait list. And Victor suggested a couple of things in here. Do we want to go to a lot? I guess maybe we kind of talked about this some. Do we want to change that? Is there a motion to leave it the same before we start beating up what our alternatives are, or do we want to start playing?
I'll make a motion that we leave the kayak waiting list process as it is.
And how about if you added, we charge staff with seeing if the list is current, so we can find out what we really have.
I don't think I'm gonna do that. I think
Okay.
if somebody's on the list and they come up and they don't want it, it goes to the next person.
Plus, I
We're in
think
So,
Okay, we've got a motion out there to leave the wait list process as is. Is there a second for that?
I second it, it's Laura.
Thanks, Laura. Any further discussion?
I guess I would agree to leave it as is, but still do some further study on it. See if there's an alternative that we're not thinking of right now.
change our mind.
That's a good suggestion, Dick. Let's deal with the question on the table and then we'll go from there.
Motion by McCullough, second by Laura Kors to leave the wait list process as is. And I will do a roll call. Tim Fletcher Rice,
Yes.
Fred Rockwitz,
Yes.
Jim Bartlett,
Yes.
Dick Schiller,
Yes.
Bill McCullough,
Yes.
Flicker Reagan,
Yes.
Michael Esposito,
Yes.
Jeff James,
Yes.
and Laura Kors.
Yes.
Motion carried.
So we've resolved those questions for me. And I think what you heard from at least a few of us, and we should probably extend this to the mortgage and doctor's wait list folks too. We haven't refreshed those lists in a while. Maybe we go through and we ask for another $50 or $25 or whatever to add to their kept amount of money that they have in escrow with the city to ensure that they're on it. And if they decide not to stay on the list, we issue them whatever they have in there as a refund on And that will let us know how current the lists are and where these guys are. It's a good thing to do it once in a while to make sure. We're gonna have 2 slips open up at the dock, and we wanna make sure that those 2 people are still alive, so to speak.
Can I suggest that, I think the last time we did it was only $10, which wasn't much of a incentive to return the letter. I think we make it more worth worth our while and just say $50. If you want to stay on the list, $50. And also set a time limit too, that has to be back to us within a month of receiving the letter. And we also have a lot of email addresses too, so contact them via email. Same thing with the kayak folks as well. You suggested, monitoring usage. If we just send a note right now to folks saying, do you intend to renew your kayak space for next year? We're going to do the same thing with the dock space as well. As you know, I talked about that the other day.
That would be a suggestion. I mean, that'd be up to staff, however we want to handle it. But I think it would make some sense.
For whatever it's worth, yeah, I like that.
So JB, can we revisit the resident only or resident preferred for kayaks? Because I do think that's worth looking at. I'm not sure what the rules or legalities of it are, but I think there's value there. I'll also comment that Harbor Springs is now reaching the tipping point where most of the marinas, maybe not the city, but private marinas were not at capacity, but since 2008 and this year it's flipping right now. So next summer, the demand is going to increase again, most likely, with what we know. So this whole problem could get compounded. That's also, it's a good idea in support of cleaning that list up, because that list is.
Do we know how many of the current kayak rack holders are local, township, or downstate, out of state?
Well, I know 2 that are city, or 1 that's city.
We can get that information. We don't break it down, but we can break it down, because we have all the information.
I look at the mooring list and the dock list, and I wonder why the hell does somebody in Oregon sit on there and the local resident is never gonna, in their lifetime, see a slip or a mooring?
Well, on the docks and the moorings, we can't differentiate for city residents. The only spot we may be able to do that would be at the kayaks. We already know the docks and moorings.
Could it not even be done at the state level? I mean, there's no federal money in this.
Our contractual relationship with the state of Michigan precludes us from issuing preferential treatment to any group, whether doesn't make any difference. You can't do that at the dock. They will let us do it for rates for city holders on the mooring, but they won't let us do it for mooring assignments. So the way we have it now on docks and moorings for waivers is the way it has to be. Now, we could probably do whatever we want to do. I want Raymer to research that and make sure that we don't get ourselves in a jam with the state. So maybe what if we all felt this way, that we would ask the staff to research what our options are for preferential city treatment for both waiting lists and for waiting lists on the kayaks, and see what our options are. If the state would allow us to do that, and we could discuss this at some other meeting and go from there.
Yeah,
I'd like to see that.
I would be in favor of looking at something like that.
why would the state have say over the city property, not the water, I get the water, but city property, why would the state have any say over how you?
Because the kayak racks at Ford Park are located on Ford Park, which is a city-owned piece of property, but the facility was built, including the grass and the parking and everything else.
With some state money.
Yes.
Okay.
And we have improved it with city money over the years.
Okay.
But once you get into bed with the state on that,
Okay,
even though
I
they
didn't
don't give you
realize.
another dime, that's why we don't want to get into bed with the state on some of these other things.
I didn't realize that they.
Because here we are now, that was built 40-some years, 45 years ago, and it was redone, and we're still can't do what we want to do.
What about Soul Beach? Is that,
That we would have whatever we want to do. The headache was looking at things like that, from my perspective, Nancy, is if you have a piecemeal approach to what you're doing in Fort Park,
oh, right,
piecemeal approach to what you're doing on Soul Beach, it's going to be impossible for these guys to keep track of it.
yeah, no, I agree, it has to be.
Yeah, but-
Yeah.
Yeah, and we're, if some news this week yet.
Laura,
Yeah.
what are you having for dinner?
Pizza.
Because we can hear you talking.
All right.
Okay. Is there anything else with kayak racks that we need to deal with? I think we're through that. Next item, and this is a high-class problem, by the way. You know, it's better this than we can't find people to come up here and enjoy it. Next item is high water update. We've all seen the water go down. We're about 4 inches from last month. We expect another 3 to 5 inches by the 9th. We're hoping for more seasonal decline. We've got a very wet week. This is what feeds this kind of stuff. So while the water is going down, it's still at historic highs. But hopefully, instead of the flat line we had last year, it did not go down through January, February, March, started going back up. We see it continue to drop, which would help us. So we're just going to keep an eye on it to see what happens.
And how far did you say we're down now?
From the 9th of October 19 to the 9th of October 20, we're down 4 inches according to the Corps of Engineers. Now, today, when you were out there, we were down a foot when you looked at it. We must have had a stage somewhere because the water was not here.
But first month in a while, we haven't set a record.
That's good.
New business. Blessing of the fleet request, if it's okay with everybody, let's move that up so you don't have to sit through any more of this. So.
It's been a pleasure.
Come on, tell the truth.
I'm Sharon Mahalik. I think I know most of you guys. And I'm the volunteer for the Historical Society and chair of Blessing of the Fleet for 5 years now. Believe it or not, you've roping me in. This coming summer will be our 9th Blessing of the Fleet. And we are, the date this year will be July 1st, 2021. And were very, very pleased last year with how it went, given COVID. We didn't have the party fundraiser. As you know, this is the Historical Society's largest fundraiser, and really a huge chunk of our operating budget. So given the fact that we didn't have a party or a fundraiser, we were very blessed that our donors continued to give us the money for the Blessing of the Fleet, or in honor of Blessing of the Fleet. And we're hoping that next year, you know, as we all don't know what's going to happen with COVID, we are at this time not planning a party, so everything will be on the water, so it can be socially distanced, and you know, whatever it will be, July 1 of 2021. But this past Blessing of the Fleet, we had the Isle Queen Royale come into town, and we had a donor that paid for the cost of that. And we sold tickets where the proceeds went to the Historical Society. We were at 50% capacity, if that. But it was a really nice success. And so I'm here in front of the council today for 2 reasons. This is the first one, to suggest that we would like to do that again next year. And now we understand we need a permit. So I'd like to request that permit and understand what we have to do to go through the process of getting that. And the second has to do with the Coast Guard, and I'll come back to that one.
The permit, Sharon, is, you already have the rules and regulations set up for this. All you need to do is contact the city manager. He's got the appropriate paperwork. There's a small fee for it, and away you go.
Wonderful.
So.
Great. Any issues or challenges that you would see in terms of that? Or?
It would depend on what your plan is, and that gets detailed out to us by completing the permit, in which case we'll take a look at it. July 1, it's going to depend on where you want to board, and having a plan that maybe goes to 1 or 2 private marinas for that is an option you should explore too.
Great. This past year, we boarded at Wallstrom. A couple of their large boats were not there, given the fact that the canals were not open. So we were able to board there. We would like to do that again. Minimize traffic, obviously, on the main field. We didn't want to interfere with any of that.
Would you provide off-site parking from Wallstrom?
Yes.
Okay. Because we couldn't, we couldn't even get our Wallstrom customer.
Oh, yeah, no, it would be off-site, and valet. We told them last year where to park, and, if we had a full boat, we'd have valet.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so your first, you know where to go with that.
Perfect, I'll talk to Victor. Thank you very much. The second one is I just wanted to update you on some ongoing communication that we've had with the Coast Guard. Andy has helped us with this. I believe it was discussed in front of the commission last year, around February of last year or so, where we did some correspondence with Lieutenant Colonel Nick Monticelli. And he is in charge of the Hollyhock cutter ship. It's a 280-some foot ship. They are very interested in working with us, the Historical Society, and because our mission and their mission are closely aligned in terms of education, maritime history, etc. And so some correspondence went out last year, and we're looking to follow that up now again with a letter again from Matt as mayor. And one of the things we don't know about timing, I will be very sensitive about timing with the city dock, and obviously around 4th of July, to have it there July 1st, which is the Thursday before 4th of July, would not work. I know that. But we want to see when they might be interested in coming, maybe a week or so before, which the docks wouldn't be as full.
I'm
And
sure this would be something that would benefit the, I won't say hysterical, but the historical side financially.
not necessarily financially, no. It is more in terms of programming and education that the Coast Guard's mission in terms of community outreach and education is similar, aligns to ours. So we'd like to do tours and education, maybe some history talks. So one thought is to kind of make it a blessing of the fleet week, or week and a half, whatever it is. I just wanted to put it out there to kind of plant the seed, get your thoughts, not necessarily all right now, but think about it.
So you're recognizing that trying to do some boat coming in that's tied in with your July 1 event is not practical because the city's already at capacity at the dock. All right,
Yes.
that's great. So if I understand you right, your question is, would the Harbor Commission be receptive to looking at somebody coming in a week ahead of time on the 25th? There's some date in there
Yes.
where we would end up having to reserve space for whatever boat that is, and then the Historical Society reimburses that dockage, which is the precedent been set before.
Yes.
So personally, I don't know if I'd have any trouble with that, once they get a plan.
Where you can put a 10-foot boat on.
At Michael's.
Right on the end? Oh,
Right on the
well,
end,
if it's
yeah.
at your dock, that's okay.
Well,
I missed that.
Yeah. Well, you're not really sure what boat's coming.
Well, no, we are asking for the Hollyhock, and we talked to the lieutenant commander of the Hollyhock. He was most interested in it, and this past year, because he was going to be doing the Cherry Festival and was going to be in this area. Andy, you want to add anything?
Yeah, so the main reason that I got involved with that, I had met that lieutenant commander, and I'm looking at it more or less as a city promotion. Looking at it as a downtown promotion. I'm getting our downtown numbers up. You guys might think that the numbers are great. You always can use more people down there. And then looking at it as an educational benefit. Again, that plays into the Coast Guard's role of promoting the Coast Guard and promoting the collaboration between a coastal community and a branch of the military. So really, that's the whole thing with the Coast Guard. And all that works all out with the DDA. We haven't talked to the DDA, but all that plays out with the DDA, the city, and with the Historic Society.
And so Andy, the time frame that Sharon points out somewhere in that third week of June, matches your,
Well, I'm just basically a conduit between the military and the city. So I'm just going by what the Historic Society would like, and then I'm the one writing the letter for the mayor as well.
so Michael, can you handle? I don't know what that thing draws, how wide it is it
That'd be the issue. I mean, we can definitely accommodate,
Wallstrom's docks? I mean,
we can accommodate lengthwise. We'd have to find out how much beam the thing has. Last year, I built a beam that was there, she was 48 feet wide, which took up an awful lot of the 90-foot fairway.
Right.
The big issue would be any kind of draft issues we have as she proceeds north along the dock. Bella Vita was almost on the bottom last year, and she was back there. So, and I'm sure that that Coast Guard cutter draws quite a bit more forward in the bow sections than the Bella Vita did, so we'd have to find that out first.
Yeah. Exactly.
And I'm sure the boat captain, he already knows all that stuff. If he fit in there, what he can do.
All right, well then let's, at this table, let's discuss whether, not the details of where to fit, we'll leave that up to these guys because we don't know tonight. But would we want to accommodate the request from the Historical Society to allow us both to come on the shoulder season sometime around the 25th of June for a round number on that, where we would guarantee probably 2 nights.
At most, yeah, I
Advantage
see,
on that, and
because it's
with
military,
the-
maybe a
with
day.
the customary expense of that not being donated from the city to the Historical Society, but the dock space would be reimbursed to the city as we have done with these guys in the past.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
I think it'd be an attraction.
Yeah.
I'd like to see it.
Yeah, you're on.
I saw when the Coast Guard cutter Mackinac, the old Mackinac, came into the harbor for the very first time. The downtown was packed.
Yeah.
Everybody wanted to see it.
But not on the 1st of July.
No, I agree.
So by consensus, are we okay with that? Anybody got any big objections? That will give you enough to get the details to Michael to make sure we can actually do it and come up with a firm date. And if it's out, any of these parameters are outside of the general book we just moved for you, then we would need to review it both from there.
Perfect. Very reasonable. Thank you.
Okay, so does that mean we approve the blessing of the fleet and this other ship that can come in here? I just want to be sure.
The blessing of the fleet, you go ahead. On that day, you'll require nothing from the city.
No, not at this
That's all gonna
time.
happen out in the lake, and it shouldn't be a problem for
Right.
us. So,
And maybe comment.
fire away, Fred.
I think we should definitely encourage that it's here at least 2 nights, so that state people have an opportunity to, during the day and evening, to go view it.
Great. Thank you, Fred.
One thing to be careful of, you know, as if we talk about extending that length of time, is people will be coming here to get their boats situated for the 4th of July as you get toward the end of June. And this boat's gonna displace, if it's 300 feet long, a fair amount of the west side of the west dock. I don't know where else you're gonna put it.
You only have about 60 feet left if she's all the way.
Yeah, so we have to be careful about how much we give away.
Yeah.
But if you bring it in around that time, we should be able to find them for it for a couple nights if it'll physically fit.
Great. Wonderful.
Is that, you're good, Sharon?
Yep, thank you.
Great. Review of marina rates. Here were the 2020 seasonal dock rates and other charges in here. And somewhere on my list, here we go. Also in there is something that Michael and I talked about, and Michael Esposito, this is related a lot to your tipping point with the 2 private marinas. Wall Street has already not told customers they're not going to renew some of their seasonal dock contracts because they haven't bought that boat from them or don't do winter storage with them. So there's somewhere around 10 or 12 people who've been told they're not going to be allowed to return next year. And those folks are going to be looking for other spaces around here. And that's their business practice, and I understand that. But what I think will happen is that, pressure, because as space gets tighter, prices go up. And I wanted to make sure we all knew where we are in relationship to not the private marinas, because we all live in this little bubble here, Harbor Springs, but how the city of Harbor Springs fits in with other public marinas in our neighborhood. So, many of you have heard me say in the past, we have the highest public seasonal dock rates of any place that I know of, not by $50, but by a fair amount of money. And I asked Michael to do some work on this, and one of the charts we have here, for example, goes through Petoskey, Charlevoix, Orange City, Traverse City, and Northport. For a 30-foot slip, they're all within $200 of $3,000. And a 30-foot slip this past year in Harbor Springs was $4,421. And as you go across to the longer slips, you see the same types of setup. For example, in Petoskey, a 60-foot slip is $5,400. Here, we're $10,000. You see the numbers? No, this is the sheet I'm looking at right now.
I didn't get that one.
But a 60-foot slip in Petoskey is $5,500, and here it's over $10,000. I think that's important for all of us to grasp as we go along, because I do hear people occasionally tell me how come our rates are less at the city than they are at the private marinas. From my perspective, there's a couple other reasons for it. Parking is certainly one of them. Privacy is another one on it. And if you compare us with other public marinas, we are 50% to 100% more expensive in those areas. So just keep that in the back of your head as we move along. It's not a comment on what the rates are at the private marinas. I respect it. We got to make sure that's not our only benchmark. So our seasonal dockage rates and other charges are here. It's time for us to set stuff, and let's look at this first by seasonal dock slips. We have traditionally done this percentage-wise. Inflation's very low. My Social Security check's only going up 1.3%. I'm not suggesting we do that here. I think personally we ought to be 2 to 3%, somewhere in that neighborhood. But I'm open for discussion.
This is my first meeting that we've done this drill. Do you all go up about every year, or when was the last time you did go up?
We took a bit of a break, Jeff, when for 09 and maybe 10. We might have gone 3 years, or maybe even 4 without it. While we were in that depression, we didn't do anything. Since then, we've tried to stay somewhere at or slightly above inflation, somewhere in there, depending on where we go.
Simple economics, it's supply and demand. We have a good product. Plus, we're trying to build a new building.
And we've always tempered that somewhat in that we are, it's a public resource. And so to maximize to the last nickel is typically not.
You know that I'm an advocate for raising prices a little bit more, closer to market. And the problem with that theory, in my opinion, is you've got a long waiting list. You're not tempering anything. You're just giving the people that have this list a good deal, which is fine if that's what you want to do. But the reality is high water we've been talking about is expensive, especially when we start to get into electrical. Maintaining docks in general is expensive. To JB's point of being compared to other municipalities, that's a very good exercise to go through. I can tell you from the private marina point, the exact same slip in Charlevoix and Harbor Springs, it's 100% increases, double in Harbor Springs, exact same facility. So there's a reality to the fact that you're in Harbor Springs. There's a demand that's going to go up, what Wallstrom's did, and what is happening just in general. So I'm not saying that we should be where private marinas are, but there is a valid reason why we're higher than our competitors. And again, new building, high water. So I would lean towards something closer to 5%. But
I respect that. I don't believe it. Is everybody else?
We're speaking, and I think doing possibly too low, but a 2 or 3% raise is a reasonable reasonable amount of stuff that will give us the revenue, and I think we are already, again, I'm going with it compared to the rest of the things for our dogs. And I think it's appropriate to raise it, but not raise it more than 2 or 3%.
Thanks, Laura. Fred, you got any comment?
I agree with Laura.
That's a good comment. Thank you. Anybody else at this table have any feedback
I'm more in line with Laura.
with Laura?
Yeah, with the 2 or 3% rather than 5%.
You know, at 1.3 for inflation, at 5% where Michael thinks we ought to go, it seems to me a 3% number makes some sense. So I would make a motion that we increase our seasonal dock slips and our seasonal moorings by 3% across the board. And let's see if we get any action on it.
Second that.
Motion's been made and seconded by Fred Rockwitz. Any further discussion?
I don't think Mike's all that out of line. I don't think another point or two is gonna sway anybody one way or the other. And it was,
Then you can vote no.
I might.
Could I just ask a question? Have we done the same comparison, or is there anyone to compare to on moorings?
There's only one other spot on a Traverse City, Greenwoodville, that I know of. And I did look at them, and it was probably 8 or 10 years ago, and they were half our price.
Okay, I have a motion. I have a second. Motion by Bartlett, second by Rockwitz to increase seasonal dock and mooring holdings by 3%. And the roll call, Flicka Reagan,
Yes.
Dick Schiller,
Yes.
Bill McCullough,
Yeah.
Fred Rockwitz,
Yes.
Jim Bartlett,
Yes.
Tim Fletcher Rice,
Yes.
Michael Esposito,
Yes.
Laura Kors,
Yes.
and Jeff James.
Yes.
Motion carried.
We're so cordial.
See how I got this out of here, though? The perfect plan.
I was prepared to go to 4. Actually, I wasn't. I think that's a good number. I think that's fair. Launch ramp permits, anybody want to dive into that? We've kind of kept those rates relatively static over the years because it's a good local access thing. It doesn't really cost us a heck of a lot of money to maintain. We are going to need some parking spots down there, but we don't have to pay for that just out of Ford Park. General Waterfront Fund, we wanted to do that. So, any feedback on that? So,
I would maintain, this is Laura.
thanks, Laura. Victor, do you need a roll call on this for, as it's a rate, or can we do it by consensus? I saw everybody's head nodding. I didn't see any notes.
I think I would take a motion on anything that we're going to change.
Okay, we leave things the same, we agree to leave them the same by consensus. Is that okay with everybody? I want to put words in your mouth.
Can I just ask a question about launch ramp? I'm looking at the commercial ones. How were the commercial rates set at 200 and 300? Where did those? Was it just
It's-
sort of a random?
No, actually, it's significantly more than we charge a resident.
Right.
You can see on that.
Right.
But they also use the ramp significantly more.
Right.
Irish has a valet service that frankly is a beautiful thing from my perspective because it doesn't take any parking, you're in and out, out on. I think at the commission level and the council approved these in the past, they also felt that the waterfront businesses pay a substantial amount of property tax down there. And this helps them utilize and make their business successful, allows for more boat sales off-site, so to speak. And it, because it was 4 to 6 times higher than the individual rate, it made some sense to us.
Nancy, I also pat myself in the back. I recommended we increase those from
Yeah.
50 to 200 last year, so.
Yeah, I have front row seat on all the traffic, of all the boats that come in and out. And it would be interesting to know on your personal launch ramps, approximately how many times a summer does somebody launch their boat? Just, so let's say they launch their boat 15 times as an average. More than 15 Irish boats go by my house every day, and Boston boats. I'm not choosing sides, but they do. They do. I mean, it's constant from 7 in the morning, 6:30 in the morning until dark. So I'm just curious how those rates would set, because the wear and tear on the ramp and the roads, and you all were talking a lot about all the busyness at Ford Park. I think a lot of that busyness is the valet service.
And do you think doubling of those rates would change that busyness?
I don't know if it would change the busyness or not, but you guys are looking for funds, and I think it would be very justified for the number of boat launches that happen, if that's how the launch rates are set. That's why I was asking.
And me as a resident on Ottawa Street, I completely concur with Nancy. That $200, $300 a year for commercial boats and on the water, that's a deal.
But those are trailable boats. What Nancy and you see quite a bit in Ottawa Street is all the big boats coming down under hydraulic trailer.
Oh, no, I know the
water.
difference between, real seriously, Mike, by 6:30 in the morning in the summer, it's almost a constant stream of valet boats. I mean, in July, we're not putting big boats in and out.
Your valet service start at 6:30 in the morning?
Oh, my gosh. They're pulling them in and out.
Irish's valet service doesn't
It
even
actually
start.
starts at 10 in the morning.
Starts at 10 in the morning, so I don't know.
But we're moving boats, not.
I get that, but they're
We're
not going
moving
to the
boats
Fort
now
Park
at 7 because of COVID. We used
Well,
to
no,
start
the
at 8,
big-
and now we've got to split our crew.
The big boat, I mean, I know the difference between the two small boats, but they start pretty early and they go until dark. So, I mean, we're talking about, in the summer, we're talking about 12 hours a day of both. I'm just looking at rates. I mean, I'm just comparing them for $200 for the whole season to put hundreds, literally, of boats in. Which, it would be interesting to know how many you launch. I'm sure you keep track.
I can tell you exactly.
Yeah.
Not now, I can
No,
say.
no, it would
We all know that
be
number.
interesting.
Yeah, no, it is
Yeah.
huge. Absolutely,
Yeah,
it's hundreds of
huge
launches.
business.
And, well, we can do whatever we want with it. It's a
Yeah.
recommendation up to council. If everybody, if after that input, you feel the same, then somebody make a motion and we'll go from there.
How long's it been since it was revisited or?
We raised them, from $50 to $200, I think, last year.
Yes.
And when did your valet service start?
You mean a date?
No, just a year. Was it?
2008,
Okay.
perfect storm, terrible time starting service.
Well, it's increased a
So,
lot, hasn't it, in the last couple of years?
No, it hasn't.
Really?
But the history of it is because in 2006-07, dockage demand was so high that I could charge anything I wanted for a slip.
Right.
And there was no place to sell boats if I sold a boat, right? So
Right.
now we're getting into a business decision, but we created that service, so it was a standby.
Right.
Go into valet, when a slip opens up,
Then you can put.
but it turned into something people really desired.
Oh, sure.
So for the first 3 or 4 years, it was 20 boats. And maybe sometime after that, 2 or 3 years later, somewhere around, I'll say 2010 or 11, we made it 40 boats, and that's been the limit since then.
Michael, does IBS charge for valet service or just the storage? It's customers.
No, we charge for the service, but they pay a fee for the service and storage. It's packaged together, but all of it, it's definitely, yeah. This is the same thing as the kayaks, right? I have some people who go in literally twice a year, and I have some people that go in almost every single day. So that's just the way pricing works. And, kayaks is the same way. Some people use it twice a year, and some people use it every day. People.
Is there do we want to raise this? Somebody,
Not if you just raised it last year, pretty substantially, it sounds like.
we did, but I don't think it's, to Nancy's point, it's not gonna break the marinas on that. And I respect that you see a balance in this. In the big picture, the extra $1,000 isn't gonna make any difference on anything, but it seems to be, I understand where you're coming from.
Michael, who has commercial permits, the launch permits?
Irish Boat Shop and
Wallstrom's
and Terry Meyer. Actually, Terry Meyer didn't purchase a permit this year. He was just doing $5 launches. Excuse me, he did purchase from that. He finally purchased it. I think Justin Bassett had a commercial permit as well with 4500 to cover his bases. And we also did something with Josh Baker for the outfit.
Yeah. that's what it is. Well, nothing would preclude 45 North or Terry Meyer with Meyer Boat Service from just paying $5 a day to bring somebody's boat and launch it down there with them. If we were making this a seasonal thing for use, you didn't have to do that every day.
Well, that permit wasn't made for me, that.
No, that was the intent of that, like a season pass instead of a daily deal. Laura, do you?
This is Laura, again, because we can ask more does not mean it's the right thing to do, and we should talk about this perhaps next year.
Well, it's gonna be next year if we keep this moving. Sorry about that. All right, so.
Can I say one more thing, maybe
to
since I'm
increase
on the
them?
hot seat?
Pardon me?
Could I say one more thing since I'm on the hot seat? There is another side to this, and that is that because we're in Fort Park all the time, Irish Boat Shop provides a lot of services to the people that use that launch ramp. Dead batteries, flat tires, I can't back my boat up, I can't get my boat on the lift. We do a lot of that, as well as just traffic management. So, because, again, Fort Park is not designed for the traffic that goes through it, including us. And so it's a traffic nightmare. So we do provide a little bit of a benefit. It has nothing to do with the rate, but it's kind of like having a lift board. There's some advantages to having someone there all the time and helping.
I've seen you guys do that too.
And I'm sure the Wall Street guys do it as well. They're there quite a bit too.
JP, I've got one more data point. There really is a lot of sensitivity out there in the community about the use of public property for private business. We got a taste of it before. And, the only thing I would say is maybe council might want to say, in terms of the intensity of use of Fort Park for the valet services, is it similar to the use that Back and Reg is taking? Is it similar to other, the ferry, for instance? So, should these fees be in the thousands rather than in the hundreds? If we're going to have some kind of parity or relationship to the amount of use and wear and tear.
That's a fair question to ask. I think the demands are significantly different on it. And it's ultimately a question that gets decided by council when it comes down to that. So, our job is to recommend what seems to make the most sense, given our little universe on this thing, and as it goes up the ladder, it's a recommendation, it's not a, it's going to be.
I think as busy as Fort Park is there, especially for that 6-week period, that it might be in our benefit to actually have a paid staff person there. Chief mentioned that people have a hard time with the self-registration. I know we do have a volunteer that does it. She comes when she can, but I really feel also Wallstrom's, helping people back up, checking the bathrooms, pulling the trash. But I think it would be in our benefit and provide a service to have a paid staff member there, at least for that July month period.
Mary
Jane gets paid?
She gets paid.
Okay.
Not substantially, but she gets paid.
And if
she comes when she's
staff
available.
determines that they want to have more of a paid person down there, then that's totally within their purveyance to do.
Because you really don't know how many people are launching that don't have stickers, especially if they're dumping and running.
That's
How much revenue is being lost?
It's like that at every launch ramp in the universe, even with a paid person, because they're out there every minute of every day, every week, all year long on it.
Yeah, but
if
in the month of
staff doesn't
July.
think that there's enough, that there's too much of that going on, then you should react with a full person.
We can talk about that. And I do want to echo a little bit what Bill said there about, there has been concerns in general about private uses at some of these parks. But also on the flip side of that, we have private residents who also using that park. So you have the businesses and residents, so you have both types of users. So it's a difficult kind of balance to fit there, but it is a concern by a lot of residents about commercialization of public property. So
I get that. From my perspective, Wallstrom is an essential type operation. The valet service at IBS is convenient. It isn't essential. They could not sell those boats. They could get rid of those customers. It doesn't affect what we're doing here. But to keep things moving around, I've moved that we increase the commercial city business and non-city businesses by 100% to $400 for city business and $600 for non-city business. Let's see what happens with that.
You're making that motion?
That's a motion, so I'm looking for a second.
I will second it.
Double the cost.
Any further discussion? Motion's been made. Nick, you want to do a roll call?
Yes, Michael Esposito.
Really, I have to go first?
It's just random.
Michael, do you want to repeat yourself or not?
You don't have to recuse yourself. The nature of this board, we've got this from Raymer forever. It's our obligation to vote on this as an advisor.
I will vote yes, I don't disagree with it. It's a priceless resource.
Laura Coors,
No,
Jeff James,
Yes.
Dick Schiller,
Yes.
Flicker Reagan,
Yes.
Bill McCullough,
Aye.
Jim Bartlett,
Yes.
Tim Fletcher Rice,
Yes.
and Fred Rockwitz.
Fred, you still awake?
Yeah, but I hit my mute button on, the answer is yes.
Yeah, boy.
Motion carried.
Motion carried. Okay, transient moorings. We're at $20 a night for up to 6,000 pounds and $30 a night for a 300 series, up to 25,000 pounds. Michael, did you get a lot of pushback on those rates or not?
No.
I,
If you can get your boat in the water and that was convenient to you, then there's no pushback at all.
do we have any feelings for what we want to do with those?
I guess I'm gonna go back to my standard question, which is, when was the last time they were raised?
Last year.
I'll quit answering asking that question. Same answer.
We leaned in last year. In
After
fact,
a
I
year,
think we
jump
backed
back.
off.
Yeah, we did later on in the year.
Yeah, we backed off because of the COVID thing, from what we had agreed to last year.
I think that's a good deal at $20 and $30. I would make a motion we increase them to $5 each, to $25 for 200 and $35 for 300.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? Nick?
Yes. I got a second. These roll calls do get tedious. Tim Fletcher Rice,
Yes.
Fred Rockwitz,
Yes.
Jim Bartlett,
Yes.
Dick Schiller,
Yes.
Flicker Reagan,
Yes.
Bill McCullough,
Yes.
Jeff James,
Yes.
Laura Coors,
Laura?
wait, yes.
and Michael Esposito.
Yes.
Anything else on this page? Do we have it addressed?
We need to consider transient rates.
Yeah.
Can we back up though?
Oh, I'm
Can we
sorry.
stay on this page?
Yes. that's on that.
So we talked about it before. I still would bring up the issue of non-seasonal dinghy storage. I guess I default to Mike.
Let's, we're gonna be talking about kayaks here in a minute, right?
I was gonna say kayaks aren't on this page either, so they're not on any page.
No, but I wrote it up to myself to bring it up, because we should talk about kayaks.
Yeah.
Let's do that right now, instead of going to transient rates.
Yeah.
Our kayak rates were how much? 150, and we raised them from 100 last year.
From 100, I think it was a
2
couple
years
years
ago.
ago. Yeah, Laura.
And then non-mooring dinghies, we took a big jump last year too.
We did, last year, we went from 50 to 150, because we thought it was just way too good a deal.
We matched the kayak stuff is where we were going with it. So
I
that-
didn't remember last year, but.
Yeah.
And you have, how do you do dinghies? There's so many spaces and that's it, or do you just hand out as many as you can sell?
I hand out as many as I think I could probably fit on either dock, either at Fort Park or down at the marina.
Well,
Was that
first,
just
to
the
make
first
sure
one?
that we can accommodate the mooring users.
Yes,
And then if there's spaces after that, based on the allocated area, we'll go ahead and sell those spots.
And is there a horsepower limit?
yes,
Yes, 15.
15.
And there's a length limit on it too.
And that's a really cheap place to keep your 11-foot Zodiac
Mhm.
with a 15 horse on it.
Yeah.
A really cheap place.
Well, it's the same thing with a kayak. It's a very cheap place to keep your kayak, and so that's why I was kind of looking at these things together. We heard a lot about kayak stuff, and so I wonder if we want to take a look at that. Because one way to control the waiting list is to
It's the way to control the lack of use too. If it's inexpensive, you just throw your kayak down there and you only use it
Don't even
once.
think about it.
You don't think about it. It solves it.
We have to balance that with, not being super greedy on it, but I don't think we have trouble going from $150 to, maybe 200, $175 or $200. That's still a very cheap way to get your boat on the water down there, when you get right down to it. David?
Dave McVicker, Harbor Springs. I was just wondering if there's any way to monitor that. I know with moorings, that you're able to get rid of the mooring holders that might occur now and then. People just throw something on there to hold on to the mooring, or is that happen quite a bit?
We have a 28-day mandatory use on the mooring, so people just don't keep it. We don't monitor if they go out to their boat and use it for 28 days, we just make sure the boat's there for 28 days. Personally, I'm not in favor of monitoring the use of anybody on this stuff, because how in the heck are you gonna do it, number one? And you have a bad summer. Bill didn't even launch his boat this year because he had a series of things that happened, and then we yanked the mooring from him, or the dock from him. That doesn't make sense. So we do have something in place that prevents a guy from just buying a mooring or a dock and coming over for dinner from Bay Harbor and going home and not using it.
Right, now that was just trying to brainstorm as far as, being able to apply something like that to the kayak usage of people that are just holding a rack spot and never using it.
One way to do it is with fees. It's the simplest way to do it in my book.
I'll point out that if it hadn't been for the COVID exemption, I would have had to either put it in or lose it. Yeah. And I kind of wish I put it in, but that's another story.
We sold it all summer long also.
I know, yeah.
Thank you.
You guys are raking it in.
So let's, I'll make a motion to raise the kayak and non-mooring holder dinghy space to $200. Let's see if that flies.
I'd second that if that was a motion.
Jeff, it was a motion and seconded by Jeff James.
Can you repeat that? I didn't get
We would
that.
raise our kayak rack storage from 150 to 200 and our non-mooring user non-seasonal dinghy user rate from 150 to 200. I like keeping those the same rate. Okay, Nick?
Yep. Dick Schiller.
Yes.
Bill McCullough.
Aye.
Flicka Reagan.
Yes.
Fred Rockwitz.
No.
Tim Fletcher Rice.
Yes.
Jim Bartlett.
Yes.
Laura Coors.
Hey, Laura?
Put the line down.
Was that a yes vote on the increase? That was a yes.
Michael Esposito.
Yeah.
Yep, we got you.
And Jeff James.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Motion carried. And we should add those to the sheet, so we don't forget them next year.
Yep.
Transient rates. You guys, Michael, you go to, where are we with, now I see rate 6, last year it was in letters. Oh, that's over here.
Yep.
Oh, that's seasonal rates, I got it.
It's in your packet.
It's right.
Some-
I don't, it's on the computer.
Sorry.
What rating cycle are we in now? G? Trying to remember.
We went to F. Excuse me, yeah, we went to F this year.
But can we review, because didn't we go up and then down?
Let me back up. We went from E to G, and then we decided to go to I, and then we reduced it at the beginning of the season this year, took it back down to that 25% increase versus a 50%.
And what category does that fall under here?
We were using G this season.
But these have numbers now.
So, the 2020 boat season,
This
we
one.
were using this G.
Well,
category.
the state changed they went from letters to numbers this year, or back the other way.
That's number,
In
that's,
2020, we were using,
That's seasonal with the numbers.
we're talking about
there's the
the
change.
transient, they're still using letters for transient.
And so the audience knows the state allows us to charge whatever we want for seasonal. But the sheet before this, slide before this, showed the minimums based on your geographic zone. But on transient rates, we can only set the max based on the zones we go in there. And we have much more flexibility than we used to, because we can pick our zone where before they told us, and we had to appeal that, which we did for years. Because of our ice exposure, we needed to generate a bigger cushion. That was the logic that worked with those guys for quite a long time. And we don't have to do it anymore because they've done this. So right now, we're at the G rate.
We're using G.
That's what I need.
But we were at I and went to G because of COVID,
We
or?
had approved at October's meeting last year going with rate I. And then COVID came to play and we knocked it back down to G. Last year, the
Thought we were
Toski.
gonna lose business with the rate being too high.
And that didn't
Right
happen.
out there.
No, but we still had a reasonable increase. It's just a matter of how much. And Michael, was there resistance to our pricing on this at all?
Got no pushback at all.
And significant demand, as your report will show us later. Frankly, I love, if you're here prime time for a week, you should pay. You get to pick when you come, it's the best time of the year, it takes the most staff, so I think you should pay as long as we're not getting resistance from our customers. So I'm in favor of going either to a 10% increase to, at least to H, and I'm open for comments.
I'm thinking we go back to I. If that's where we were, we went back just because
I'll
of
make a
COVID.
motion that we take it to I.
Second.
Whoa,
We got 2 seconds, so call that a fourth.
I'll third.
What about letter K? We can make our own comments.
I like the way you think.
We're gonna get that building yet.
Motion's been made to go from,
Tim Fletcher
current
writes.
rate, schedule of G to the state rate of I, and it's been seconded. Any further discussion? Nick?
Yep. Fred Rockwitz.
Yes.
Tim Fletcher Rice.
Yes.
Jim Bartlett.
Yes.
Bill McCullough.
Aye.
Flicka Reagan.
Aye.
Dick Schiller.
Yes.
Michael Esposito.
Yes.
Jeff James.
Yes.
And Laura Kors.
No,
And a girl.
Motion carried.
Any other rates, we gotta talk about today?
Hope not.
It actually went really well. Thank you, everybody.
I do have one question.
Yes, ma'am.
On the long-term permits, this seasonal dash residence, with the asterisk saying, City of Harbor Springs, West Traverse Township, and Little Traverse Township residents. This means that you reside here seasonally, but you're not a state of Michigan resident, is that correct?
That means you have to show you are a resident, that your primary residence is in one of those 3 communities.
Primary or just a property owner?
I think it's just property owner. isn't it?
It's just
Yeah.
happening.
I don't think it
And
has to be your
I live on
class
the
I.
point, and so I'm in West Traverse.
Mhm.
And we do use the launch ramp twice a year, except not this year because I was sick, to put our little sailboat in and
Well,
take
then
it
you're
out.
better off to go $5 a lunch.
Exactly.
Well, no, you're
I'm not
considered
gonna
to
do the seasonal because I don't take it in and out all the time.
Yep.
But I was just curious to be sure that I didn't have to be a permanent resident of the state of Michigan.
You want to do this, put it in.
You could get the season
Yeah.
pass.
Don't pay for it.
She said auction twice, so I thought she wanted to know.
Oh.
All right, last item, and the best for last. Before you get started, Michael, I thought you had a stellar year. Challenging environment. The girls were great, and the place was cleaner. I think you did a very good job on it, I wanted to say that.
I appreciate that very much. Well, you covered the first part of my speech, Judy. We did have a stellar season for sure, but I really want to thank Kathy Sadison. I don't know if you guys know Kathy at all, but she's our deputy treasurer, just all around good person who handles
She's a gem.
basically. Pardon me?
She's a
She
gem.
is a gem. Kathy pulls together all the contracts, loans, docks, kayaks, all that stuff, gets it all out on time, and that's a huge job. And she also helps me quite a bit with bookkeeping day to day, so kudos to Kathy, and also kudos to this guy next to me right here, Mr. Simondowski. I'm trying to pronounce that name properly. And also, as JV just mentioned, a big thanks to a stellar crew that I had this year. There were only 4 of them, and they just rocked it this summer. All season long, there was never any really issues with anybody kind of standing around leaning in the counter. They all just wanted to get outside and do stuff. They helped Denny's staff out quite a bit down at Ford Park. Hope they continue doing that as we progress. The big project that we had, we talked about that back in August, was the installation of electrical pedestals. Those were received mid-August, and finally those guys got around to installing things. I think it was 2 weeks ago. We wanted to wait until we were sure that everybody didn't need power anymore, so we weren't going to cut off anybody's steaks in the fridge. So try to take care of that. But they got that done in a day, and we got it done super fast. We also talked in August about the damage we incurred in the mooring field in that big July tornado. We did have one boat break loose that actually snapped the mooring chain that connected the buoy to the tackle on the bottom. We had another boat that snapped its mooring pennant, so that was not our equipment related. And as a result of that, in consultation with Victor and the dive team, and also Jim was instrumental too, we decided to go ahead and replace every piece of mooring chain in the mooring field. We got a pretty good price, a really good price back from a gentleman who's actually a member of Little Traverse Yacht Club, longtime resident up here. We got a real good price on the chain that we replaced it with, and it's actually an upgrade on what we've been using in the past. And instead of looping old pieces of chain together to try to create a newer piece of chain, which is really not recommended practice, we learned, everything got replaced in the mooring field. And we still have 2 buoys we have to fix because they managed to turn themselves upside down. We hope to get that done yet this fall.
2 anchors.
2 anchors, excuse me, not net buoys yet. 2 anchors, and that should be accomplished hopefully this fall before Fred decommissions the barge, and if that doesn't happen, it'll be next spring for sure. But the big part is the big season that we had, and it's all reflected in numbers that hopefully you guys all have in front of you. I think I passed that out to everybody. Jim also asked me to pull together last year's total boat count, and our new accounting system gave us a total number for this season of 722 registered boats. Last year we were at 750. And if you look at the numbers, our seasonal dockage was down because we lost a 60-foot slip. The gentleman decided to move down to Wellstrom Lane, so that was a $2,000 decrease. We also gained back a little from another gentleman switching from a 30 to a 45-foot slip. Transient dockage was up substantially from last year. 135 last year, we're almost $170,000 this year. Seasonal moorage was
Now,
up
remember,
this
we
year.
had a pretty good rate increase in there too.
A substantial rate increase, right? Transient moorage, that's a huge increase. A lot of it because we waived the 29-day minimum stay this year. And we managed to sell a lot of those boats and sell moorings on a transient basis. People just love being able to get the boat in the water, not have to bounce around off the dock. That really helped us out a lot. Dinghy and kayak storage, that number is reflected by an increase from non-seasonal dinghy sales, which amounted to $2,000. I think we're going to see that number decrease next year if we bump it up to $200. Kayak was 11,400 even with the year before. Launch ramp wasn't up as much as I thought it was going to be. I thought we'd see a substantial increase in that fee. But daily fees were $59.25 and annual fees at $77.45. Electric sales were down. We saw a tremendous amount of small boats this year. Not a whole lot of boats needed 50-amp service. So we saw a lot of 30-amp plugins, which you will have for free. Ice sales is a number that surprised me. I thought with as hot as it was in August, all those 90-degree days we had, we only did $1,600 versus $1,800 last year. Pop sales, I'm getting rid of just broom that pop machine from the side of the building. It just doesn't generate enough actual sales to justify the cost of the pop in the first place.
I'd say that's totally your decision. Michael. It's not a customer asking for it, I would get rid of it. They are paying.
No.
And it looks terrible at night to see that light as you come into the rain.
So in that top column or the top portion of the page, we had an increase of 8.62% in total revenue. And if you go to the bottom of the page, the difference from the previous year amounts to 20.95%. And again, I think you can attribute a lot of, as Jim's already said, to the increase in transient rates. We're gonna see probably another increase next year, because I think we're gonna see the same kind of season we had this year, traffic-wise, next year. And that's the good news.
Thank you.
Great job.
So then where do you think our,
Cash is at?
Yeah.
Between $800,000 and $900,000.
see, we're gonna get there. But you don't want to say it out loud in front of 50 people, because if something goes wrong, you're gonna get chewed. But we have a couple more years like this, and we're gonna be close enough to still keep enough money where we can handle our shoreside stuff. And for you folks in the audience, and you got to know it, one of the big reasons we want to maintain a sizable cash balance is in case we have some kind of ice damage in the spring. You could wipe out that e-stock in a heartbeat, and then we'd be on the hook for $1 million. So we don't think that's going to happen, but you can't not be prepared for it. So Michael, we.
I'll conclude by thanking all of you for your support. I think that your continued support makes this marina, from what I hear from all the voters that come to us and our seasonals as well, the best place in the world to be. Everybody loves being in Harbor Springs. It all starts at this table.
One quick comment from me. We've had a lot of talk about Ford Park. And parking is an issue there on single car things. We discussed this at this table for years on that. And I wonder if we shouldn't ask staff to take a look at what it would cost to add 4 or 8 spaces, maybe on that east side.
We're actually doing that, and Danny, you kind of, and Lucas, we talked a little bit about the figures of how much it would cost to add parking spaces. I think we looked at 14 is the maximum spaces.
Yeah, it was around $40,000.
About 40.
To add 14 spaces?
To add 12.
To add 12.
Right.
Is it proportional? We do half, is it 20? I mean, how does the layout work? I don't know
It
what
would have
you're-
been on the east, it'd be making them even on both sides, going north, obviously. And not getting too close to the sidewalk, so there's a buffer there between the parking.
So this,
Excuse me, Laura Court is stepping out of the meeting.
Thanks, Laura.
Bye, Laura.
so again, I say it's proportional to an extent, and there's mobilization.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
Well, I wonder how we would feel at this table if we kind of gave the staff an okay to spend $20,000 out of our waterfront fund and see where we are with that. And if it turns out it's 15 or 25, we talk about it, go from there. I think we can afford it with this. I try to bite this off in little pieces and try and come up with 50 down the road. Although I said we shouldn't make decisions about Ford Park based on a snapshot of this year, we've been talking about this for quite a long time, and there's no doubt.
So, JB, this is going to be on our capital improvements plan, we're going to take the council as renovations for Ford Park, including the costs, potential parking improvements, and when we could think we
And
could reasonably do it.
I'm seeing a councilman here, and maybe some feedback from us would help him make his decision as we move forward with that. So does that make some sense, or? Yes, Mike?
Well, I'm gonna really say that you're kind of making, the parking is all wrong in Ford Park. But, you know, you've got the trailer parking on the west side against the kayak racks. Those people don't use the kayak racks in order to get where you park next on the west side of the green space. That's where the kayak people park. You have to cross all the traffic. The entire place is wrong. So before we throw $40,000 at it, throw $10,000 at someone with a design background to really look at it. I realize it's a huge amount of money to redesign that park, but it is all wrong.
Yeah, but
That's why I've said it over and over again, but it is just wrong.
But
The users have outgrown the space.
Don't add spots until you have a design.
But
I think we learned a lot. with the
Well, we've
redesign.
heard an opinion from, maybe it's shared by a couple of people on that. You know, I was involved in the layout of that thing when it was put in, when the state came in, and that is a small spot. There is not a lot of other things that can be done. Now, maybe you can move put single car parking on the west side of that, put trailer on the other side, but you're gonna lose trailer spots because the building is in that spot. It's pretty well maxed out for the space that it has. The only space open is
It
still
is,
the
but
green space in the
it's-
middle.
I don't want to say the word, it's unsafe, so it could be better designed. I'm not saying you'd get more parking in there. It would be more user friendly and be safer. You cannot get to the green space at the water without crossing moving traffic.
But it would, you'd also have to address the drainage.
Of course you would.
So, I mean, it's
It's a
really,
big
it's
project.
$1 million, I mean, I totally agree with you, but it's $1 million project. So how long is it gonna take us to get that money? And I understand $40,000 is a lot, but that's probably good. We're 10 years off from that. To be, just a reality.
It's not a reality.
We're 10 years
You
off
don't know
from
'cause
getting $1
nobody's
million.
designed it.
Well, the storm drainage is a huge problem there. That's the drainage issue, and that's gonna be, you gotta take that whole thing out and fix what's going on there.
Right, but putting in $40,000 worth of parking spaces isn't helping the drainage.
I'm
I
talking
think that's
about,
a, that's. a
talking about
decision.
20,000 maybe, so we get a few more spots down in that thing. Who knows what's gonna happen on the redesign, whether that's good or bad on it. I think we are a long way away from having any major redesign in that thing. In the meantime, if we're 10 years out on it, we're paying $2,000 a year to park another 5 or 8 cars, whatever it is in that spot. To me, that's a way of showing people we're listening. And we already know we've added for the density, traffic down in that thing, but we didn't add anything to the parking. Now we got a chance to do it. I'm not saying we shouldn't plan for the future, but I don't want to wait. Personally, I don't think we got to wait that long to do it. 20 grand in there is not wasting money. From my perspective. And I love you, you know I love you.
I don't know. This is my opinion.
Maybe we just look at some of the spots and how we restructure some of the spots. I mean, I agree that the spots, the trailer spots against Michael's building are never used, hardly ever used. And those are kayak people that would be able to park there and not have to park up on Third Street. I don't know. I mean, I'm down there, we write a lot of tickets. And very seldom besides kayak parking do you see trailer parking over on that against Michael's building.
Unless it's a weekend.
Yeah. And even that is minimal. I mean,
I've seen both sides, all of the trailer spots filled down there at probably 3 days this summer. Where we had no place else to park a trailable boat.
right.
And the reason that spot was put in there was to have a trailable boat launch. So I've been resistant to cut down those number of spots, even though maybe it's only full for 3 days. Who knows what's gonna happen down the road? But that's the only spot those guys can put. You can park cars in other spots. So that's why I've kind of leaned towards expanding the single car parking north toward Bay Street on either the west or east side on that thing. And then we go from there. The reality is, if we go through a redesign on that, the trailable spots are gonna have to be wider and longer because the boats and the trucks are wider and longer. And we're gonna have trouble fitting in what we got down there. On a redesign. So, at any rate, that's just my opinion. And if nobody else feels that way, then let's not plant the seed in council's head.
I think it's a worthwhile discussion that keeps coming up.
20 grand on a budget like we have, doesn't seem like a lot of money to mitigate a problem that we know we have.
And you said, Victor, that it's on the capital improvement.
It's one of not for the entire redo of the parking lot, but to add some spaces, that's on.
Yeah. I think it should be discussed.
All balls in your court.
That'd be a better use of money than a picket fence.
Any other comments from the
Expense is
table?
$2,000, man.
No,
It's the best view in town.
not the
I
project.
don't even know. We're in Mars, we're in record territory.
Is there a limit?
Billy's been on this longer than me, and I've been doing this for 30 years.
Little over
Never
2
had
hours.
meeting like
That's
this.
the best view in town.
My wife's not gonna believe it.
But I told Vince we had a hell of an agenda. We gotta get to
Down
this.
from out in the lake, I'll just leave the parking lot, might as well go to Walmart.
Are you
Hey,
calling?
Go ahead.
Are we adjourned? We have a,
Get COVID.
Are we giving the money or not?
council's heard feedback from both sides, they're gonna talk about it. That's the beauty of being an advisory board.
Right.
Okay.
Are we adjourned?
I think we're adjourned. Thank you all very, very, I'm going to the pier for beer.
Get all that? I'll go get one of your flavored wines or whatever that stuff we do.